How to fix screen. No, it should be something like the history of fixing screen monitors.
YouTube is rammed full of
Learning about screen monitors because I will be dissecting and fixing my broken screen. Monitors will be learning about screen monitors. The history of fixing screen monitors.
rammed full of videos about the development of computers, working through the mainframe and mini-computer era, and particularly concentrating on the microcomputer era of the 1980s. In fact, I've made one or two myself. And in these videos YouTube is rammed full of videos about the development of computers, working through the mainframe and mini-computer era, and particularly concentrating on the microcomputer era of the 1980s. In fact, I've made one or two myself. And in these videos, we concentrate on how the machines developed over time, how memory changed, how the CPU changed. But there's one thing we seem to keep ignoring, and that's displays. So I'm going to attempt to redress the balance, or at least in my own content. So welcome to the abridged history of computer display technology. Ooh. But before we get into that, of course, there is the obligatory, a quick word from our sponsors. And as those of you who have been watching for a while will know, the sponsor of today's video is PCB, purveyor of
Ethical Reacts.
Yes, Perry, that's
It
what
looks like a
stands
pretty
for.
interesting
But they also
ad.
do things like CNCing
I'm
and
gonna
3D printing, injection mold making, and they'll even put components on your board for you. They really are quite busy by the sounds of things. Oh, and of course they sponsor about 3/4 of the videos on YouTube as well. Honestly, I'm beginning to think that the whole PCB thing's just a bit of a side hustle for them, and they're mostly into content creation. I should probably say what this video is going to be and what it's not going to be. Let's start with the not. This is not going to be an exhaustive history of every single display technology ever created, because A, that video would be very, very long, and B, that video would be very, very dull. To get to where we are now, there's been a whole bunch of blind alley style technologies out there. some of which are interesting and some of which really are not. So I'm not going to cover every single one of them. What I am going to do though is try and give you the general sweep of how we got from where we started to where we are now. And I may take a little detour into some of the weird stuff along the way. I mean, yeah, it's me, of course I'm going to do that. Let's go all the way back through time to the very early beginnings of computers, and to what is widely now acknowledged to be the world's first computer, Colossus. Although if you read your textbook that's a little bit old, it won't mention its existence at all, because we kept it about as a secret thing can be. At the National Museum of Computing, on the Bletchley Park site, although not part of the same museum for... yeah, you'll find a rebuild of Colossus, and there the people who operate it quite frequently apparently get asked the question, where's the screen? Many of us assume that computers always had an output screen, a display, something you could see stuff on. But this is not the case. The only output device attached to that thing is a printer. And when I say printer, what I really mean is an electric typewriter. Now, I think the reason they get asked that question is everyone just assumes as long as this has been a computer, there's probably been some sort of display for it, right? I mean, how else were you going to use it? But we didn't use early computers in the way that we use them now. With early machines, we're just concentrating on getting anything working at all. In fact, the Colossus, the machine I mentioned earlier, that is essentially a single-purpose computer. It's got one job to do, and that's to generate candidate key streams for decoding messages from German High Command. You could, in theory, reprogram it to do other things, and by reprogram I mean rewire. And that was true of all the other machines developed just slightly after it. The US's first machine, ENIAC, also had the same restrictions in that you could reprogram in it by essentially rewiring it. When you've got that level of complexity going on, getting anything out of it, even if it's just printed on a piece of paper by an old typewriter, seems pretty darn fantastic. Now luckily we don't stay in the era of let's rewire it to program it for very long, and soon we get into the era of actual software. And the first machine to get there is the Manchester Small Experimental Machine, affectionately known as the Baby. For American computer scientists, it's actually pretty shocking that this thing seems like it came out of absolutely nowhere, because they had no idea that the stuff they thought was brand new and cutting edge was something that the British had done quite a few years earlier, and some of that Bletchley Park team were involved in developing the Baby. Now, I mention this not just to give the Baby some form of historical context as to how it got to be, but rather there's one technology in here that some people think of as one of the first display technologies. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, because this was not intended to be a display technology, it was just a handy side effect, but I'm gonna cover it, because it is interesting, and also, it helps me introduce another display technology later on. See, there is method to my madness. The thing I'm talking about is the Williams-Kilburn tube, which is an early memory technology. Memory was a particularly hard problem for early computer pioneers. We had reasonable ways to do logic circuits, using valves and then later transistors. However, using those same electronic techniques when it came to memory, well, there was a problem. Creating even a single bit of memory required a surprisingly large number of either valves or transistors, so having even a small amount of memory would require a vast quantity of power and space. Now, both Williams and Kilburn had been involved in radar development work during the Second World War, so we're both pretty familiar with cathode ray tube technology, the sort of thing that we later used to, make TV go. And they found themselves at Manchester University, along with Max Newman, who had been involved with Colossus at Bletchley Park. Now, the idea that Williams and Kilburn had come up with is that you could use a CRT to both store and read electronic data. Now, the key advantage of this approach is it would allow for random access, whereas other proposed schemes to provide electronic memory couldn't be, like a mercury delay line. And this is why Manchester built the small experimental machine, the Baby. It was to prove the Williams-Kilburn tube. Now, we're probably all mostly familiar with how a CRT does what it does. You have an electron beam that strikes a phosphor layer at the other end of the tube, and if it strikes it with enough energy, i.e. the voltage is high enough, well then, it makes that phosphor glow. And once you've got past that initial threshold value, increasing the voltage makes the phosphor glow a bit brighter. And this is basically how a TV works. You vary the intensity of electron beam so the picture gets brighter or darker. That's how we get our images we scan from left to right, top to bottom. Williams and Kilburn took a 6-inch diameter CRT and would trace a line from left to right, then step down a line and trace again. If they wanted a 1 to be represented there, well, the electron beam would be turned up sufficiently to make the phosphorus glow. If you wanted a 0, well, you'd make sure that the electron beam was not sufficient to make the phosphorus glow. So that gives us our scheme for writing. But how do we read? Well, essentially, you scan the surface of the CRT again with the electron beam. However, this time the beam sets so low that it won't cause the phosphorus to glow. Where the beam hits some phosphorus that's not glowing, it still causes some electrons to splash off from the other side. And those are picked up by a thin metal plate that sits on the outside of the tube at the display end. It catches those electrons and essentially senses a current. Where the beam hits phosphorus that's already glowing, well, that's already been depleted of electrons, so there's no electron splash. Therefore, we don't have a current between the CRT and the small metal plate. There's a lot more detail to this that I'm not going to go into, like how you refresh it, etc. But we've established the principle of here we have what is essentially a display device, or normally is used that way, being used as a memory storage device, rather than as a display device for the computer. So this would seem pretty clear. A Kilburn tube, it's memory, not display, even if it does use what is traditionally seen as a display component. However, there's a but, and it's a big but, I cannot lie. If you pull down the metal plate in the front, you can see all the dots. Now this is a fact that system operators took advantage of. They would fold down the little metal panel and then they could see what's in memory. This meant if the software you fed it wasn't doing the thing you thought it was going to, well, you could debug the problem and work out, is it my program or is it the hardware? Now despite the fact that people were looking at this thing, this is why I don't count this as display technology. That's not its primary purpose. They did not intend for people to be looking at it. It's not a purposeful display. It just happens to be that there's a side effect that you can use to observe what's in memory. But it's still a debugging aid. It's not that people are using it to purposefully display stuff. But you can see why some people might view it that way. In fact, if you'd wanted to, you could have put a very particular pattern in memory to make something that looks like a picture on this thing. As we progress on from these early experimental machines and we start to get into the world of commercial systems, from a display point of view, not a lot is really going on. Most commercial computing that's happening is what's referred to as batch mode. In this way of operating, the computer would be run over a batch of data. It would do its job and then it would stop. A developer would create their program, get it all up on punch card, and put it and any data they had on punch cards into a pigeonhole for a machine operator to then take out and run on the machine, and they might get returned a nice printout with some summarized data in and possibly some other data outputted on punch cards as well. So in batch mode, there's no interaction with the computer. The job just starts and finishes either successfully, producing some output on a printer, or it crashes and that's it, job over. So in this era, we don't really have display technology because there's nothing to interact with. What we do have, however, is a series of indicator lamps on the front of the machine so the system operator can kind of tell what's going on. After all, if a program's crashed and stuck in a loop, you kind of need to know. Now these sort of indicator systems became known as blinking lights because, well, they're lights that blink. And pretty much all mainframes of this period had a blinking lights interface you could use to see what was happening. But again, this is not a display technology. It is used by the operator of the system to see what's going on, but it's not directly under the control of software being used for the purpose of, well, displaying stuff. It's just showing you the machine state. Now, of course, like anything like this, you can, of course, misuse it to try and do some form of display work. For example, when early micros got this as an interface to control the machine, there was a game called Chase the Bit. That game would illuminate all the lamps in turn, so it looked like there was a bit moving from right to left, and you had to press a switch underneath the lamp at the right time so you caught the bit. But again, this is another case of using a thing that's connected to a computer for one purpose and repurposing it for something slightly else. It's not still a computer display as such. Now in batch computing, there's no need for display technology, but batch computing didn't hold sway forever. There were a number of limitations with it. Everyone who used the computer was very far removed from it. You couldn't just write some code, quickly run your job, see if your program worked. You had to wait for your time, your slot. You'd all be waiting in a queue. It also meant that any data that the system was going to use, well, it had to be collected outside the system, put onto punch cards, collated, and then put together for the machine. The computer itself didn't really take part in the data collection process. So it became pretty clear that batch processing, it wasn't going to be the future for everything. And here we get two key developments happening at more or less the same time. And they were the idea of developing a smaller scale computer that could be used by a small number of users, where the user and operator are one and the same thing. And the other is that of time sharing, which would allow multiple users to make use of a bigger machine at the same time. Both these two things lead us to the concept of interaction with the machine. On the smaller machine, The significantly lower user count per machine meant that it was worth having your ability to interact with the machine so you could do stuff that you couldn't do before, as the computer could be the tool of one person rather than the tool of the entire finance department, the stock department, and everyone else in the company. The other approach being that of time sharing, where you thinly slice the time of a bigger machine. If you're going to thinly slice the time of the machine between people, then people are going to need a way to interact with the machine to tell it what they want it to do. And it was this need for interaction that drives our first display technologies. And there's two particular ones I want to talk about. Now they both happen at the same time, but I can't talk about two things at once, so I'm going to have to do them in an order. So I'm going to start with the vector display on the DEC PDP machines. Now with the PDP range, DEC created what's referred to as the first mini system. Now this is the idea of a smaller computer that's used by a small number of users, say 1 or 2 people in a department. And with the early PDP machines, DEC makes available something known as a vector display. Now this is one of the first purposeful display technologies that puts something a user might want to see on a screen. Now as I mentioned earlier, cathode ray tubes have been around for a while. We're even in the era of TV at this point. However, a vector display works differently to how a TV works. In fact, it works more like how an oscilloscope works, which again was already a thing at this point. Now I don't have a DEC vector display to show you, so I'm going to illustrate it using this thing, an early 80s games console called a Vectrex. Now the display in this doesn't work like a CRT TV. In a TV, you essentially have the electron beam scanning across the screen, then it steps down one line, scans across again, with the varying intensity of the electron beam making the phosphorus glow or not glow. That's how we get our image. A vector display doesn't work that way. The electron beam doesn't scan from left and right, slowly progressing one line down the screen each time. With the vector display, what we have is we can steer the beam to the left and right and top and bottom, and we control the brightness of it, and that's how we draw the individual lines on the screen. We direct the beam to make the path of the line. It works much more like an Etch-a-Sketch does than a TV, which is just what this Vectrex here is doing. The problem for this kind of display, and why it took us so long to get to this technology, is that after you've drawn the line, after a relatively short amount of time, it fades. So in order for whatever we're displaying to remain on the screen, we have to keep redrawing it. And if we're going to keep redrawing it, the machine has to remember, well, what it's supposed to be drawing. And this is what meant that this technology took so long to appear, because memory was a difficult and expensive problem to solve. So our Vectrex here, it has essentially a chunk of memory that's dedicated to storing all the lines that needs to be drawn. And the hardware keeps running through that list and drawing them on the CRT. And our early PDPs, it had the same thing. Now for our Vectrex here, they're relatively cheap for the time, modernish DRAMs. Little microchips, you know, the thing you're used to seeing as memory. For the DEC PDP-1, well, we're nowhere near that sophisticated yet. DRAMs have yet to be invented. We're using what's referred to as core memory at this point. Yes, they finally got past things like the Kilburn tube, and using mercury in little glass tubes as well to store stuff. Here we have a collection of little ferrite rings, with each ring representing either a 1 or a 0, depending on which way round it's magnetized. Now, as you can imagine, wiring together millions of tiny ferromagnetic rings is an incredibly time-consuming and expensive process. This means that the most expensive thing in a computer of this era is its memory. So up until this point, computers' memory had just been used for storing data and running code. The idea of dedicating some of it to making a display output work, well, you need one heck of a use case for that. Now on mini computers, this just about made sense, because the machine is to give a highly expensive tool to a limited number of people, and graphical interaction with the machine, well, that increases the utility of that tool. They can do things like design work on it. The other reason this is viable is a mini computer's a lot cheaper than a mainframe. So a company can afford to give this tool to a very limited number of users in the company and still have it be financially viable. And this is why this sort of display technology becomes much more of a mini computer thing than a mainframe thing, or at least at this point in time. This neatly brings me on to the next display technology I'm going to talk about. Now this one's much more mass market because it can work on mainframes, so it's good for the whole time slicing thing. It's also used on mini computers because we need to input things like text and numbers and display them. And the vector display, well, it's not very good for displaying text, is it? The technology we're talking about is that of the teletype. Now this technology existed separate from computers, in fact quite a long time before many computers came into existence, but had all the properties that they were looking for in a device to do some interaction. You had a keyboard for inputting data, you had a way to display stuff that did not require the computer to remember anything at all, And they already existed, so you could just buy one and design the interface to connect it up to your computer. Now, teletype machines were built for sending telexes, essentially text over a phone line, although it is its own separate network from the regular phone network. Yeah, let's not go into the whole telex thing right here and now. But what you've essentially got is a device that's like a glorified typewriter. And some of the more simple ones are actually just modified typewriters. And it prints characters just like it would on a regular typewriter. There's a roll of paper, it prints characters, the carriage moves along. Eventually you hit the end of the line, carriage return, the carriage returns back to one side, the paper rolls up, it starts printing the next line. Now some of them were a bit more fancy, that you could pre-type stuff and it'd punch it out on paper tape, and you could read it back in and it was like you were typing it again. But no matter the fanciness of your particular teletype machine, this opened up a whole new world for computing. We now have an actual display device that regular normal human beings can look at and read the output of and provide input into the computer. Up until this point, your only interaction with the machine had really been in the form of punch cards. If you were someone entering data into a system, you would sit there with your mechanical machine punching little holes in a card, and eventually a collection of these cards would be put in a pigeonhole, and that data would eventually get used by a system operator. You have not touched or used the computer itself in any way, shape or form as part of this process. And if you get any response back from any of the jobs you're running, the most you're going to end up with is a printout or some more punch cards in your pigeonhole. With a teletype machine now attached, a user can input data live into the system. The system can validate that data as they're inputting it as well. A user can also make live-ish queries of the system. For example, if they want to know, how many Chelsea buns are we about to dispatch today? Well, that's a thing that they could get from the system fairly live, rather than having to talk to a system operator that would eventually run a job that would kind of provide a printout at some point in time. For software developers, this was a huge change. They could actually create and edit their program on the computer they were going to run it on, and run it when they felt like. It wasn't again all punch cards in a pigeonhole, and you either got back at sort of 2 in the morning that your job had worked or your job had failed. Debugging of your code on the computer became an actual thing. And this is the level of jump you get with what is essentially the most primitive display technology you can imagine. A typewriter connected to a computer. Now this sort of technology hung around for a long time, or at least in computing terms. In fact, when better display technologies came along, these solutions were still referred to as hard copy terminals, and kept in use for a long time. In fact, there's remnants of this technology still around today. If you're a Unix or Linux user, you might have noticed that all your serial port devices are referred to as dev TTY. So, for example, the first serial port on your machine, TTY-S0, second one, TTY-S1, and the USB ones, TTY-USB0, for example. Well, the TTY part of that stands for teletype, because in the early Unix days, that's what you had connected to those devices. It's where the teletype machines plugged in. In fact, even the virtual console on your machine is referred to as a virtual TTY. The other place you may have encountered the legacy of this is if you've ever used a single line text editor, like Ed, for example. Ed the editor, not Ed the person, although an Ed may have actually used Ed. The reason for this is you can't exactly scroll the TTY back again and start changing stuff. Everything must be done on the live line that's being printed at the moment. And this is what these text editors were there to do. You could edit a text file, but only one line at a time. I happen to have one of these editors on my Amiga, and yeah, at the time it confused the heck out of me as to why anyone would design anything this way. But I was born after TTYs were a thing. Now, it's really not hard to realise what the limitations of this sort of technology was. I mean, for a start, you've got paper coming out everywhere, you're using ink, it's fairly slow, it's really, really noisy. I mean, when Dave brought the one that I filmed to the museum for our retro computing event, I was in another room and I could hear him turning that thing off and on, as it's always making an incredible volume of noise, even when it's not printing anything and you're not typing anything in, due to the motor that's constantly running inside this thing. However, of all the limitations I've just mentioned in this kind of technology, the biggest one is that you can't go back up and edit stuff that's been printed out already. The display isn't really interactive in that sense. You can only append more data to the output. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, and possibly currently screaming at YouTube, is that there's a clear way that they could, well, make this technology better. Instead of outputting to paper, you could use a CRT as a display. Then, you can array stuff that's gone before, and you can change the output of more than one line. This is getting more like a proper computer display, right? And what's holding this technology back is RAM. We've got the CRT, we've got enough electronics that we can get some text on the screen if we wanted to. What we're missing is the cost-effective bit of memory. If you're going to keep displaying text on a machine, it has to be held in memory so it can keep being regenerated on the CRT. Teletypes neatly avoid the need for any kind of memory because it's just appending on a piece of paper. The paper is the memory, if you like. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is we will eventually get that sort of technology. In fact, they were referred to as glass TTYs at one point, and that would evolve into the terminal. But there's a little bit of an intermediate step there. And again, this all comes down to memory. Even when these devices first appeared, it was too expensive to put core memory in a terminal. Core memory was still incredibly expensive to create, and if you were going to pay for more of it, you were going to put it inside the computer itself. So here's where we get an interesting point in the evolution of the terminal. IBM comes up with this box that is essentially a display controller. It has a couple of lines out to the computer that fake the TTY devices, and then you plug the video lead of a couple of CRTs into it and some keyboards. And this display controller box essentially acts as multiple terminals. Now, it has some memory inside it, but it's not core memory. Now, I'm going to introduce the last memory technology of this video, and it's possibly the craziest of all of them. It's what's known as delay memory, or delay line memory. Now, I had mentioned earlier something called mercury delay line memory, but this works on a different principle. What you have is a piece of wire coiled round in, well, to make what looks like a clockwork spring. On the outside end of this, it's either twisted to the left or to the right. One direction being a 1, the other direction being a 0. That twist left or right then essentially propagates along the length of the piece of wire round the coil until it eventually hits the other end, where it's picked up by a little transducer that turns that left or right vibration into either the 0 or the 1 effectively, with a bit of accompanying circuitry to go with that. That value can then be used by whatever circuitry wanted to remember something, and optionally can be sent back to the actuator at the beginning of the coil, so the value ends up getting put back in memory again and travels round the coil of flat wire again. Now, IBM's terminal controller box essentially had one of these delay line memories for each of the CRTs connected, and we just make sure that the delay line is long enough so the timings work out such that data is coming out in a way that's in time with the scan beam of the CRT, so it can draw all the characters in turn. Now, this gives us our basic glass TTY. We now have a device that acts pretty much like a TTY, only now it's drawing characters on a CRT. We're also not using any of the main computer's memory, we're using the memory that's inside the CRT controller. But this device is not wildly sophisticated, it's not much more than a typewriter typing on a glass screen. We also have the disadvantage that each terminal is not separate from each other, they all actually share a controller, or at least a number of them do. And then we have the biggest drawback, which is how the memory operates. Because this memory is not randomly accessible, it has to be accessed in order, it makes editing what's on the screen very difficult and slow. And then there's the inherent problem in using vibrations to store data. Now, IBM put some proper effort into trying to shock isolate these things. They were put on shock mounts, there was internal vibration damping inside there. Even when they installed it, they put it on a special coloured carpet so you knew not to walk on that bit of the room. But people did. And that's the core problem with any technology that uses vibration as a way of storing values. Any other external vibrations change those values. So if you walk next to one of these things, well, suddenly characters started changing on people's screens. Or characters started to appear where there are not characters before. You corrupted the display of your users. And having a display technology that can't survive someone walking nearby it or closing a door or shouting loudly is not a great display technology. Fortunately, we were all saved by the invention of the DRAM. The DRAM was an incredible leap forward. It finally gave us a memory technology that was small, compact, and relatively affordable, and finally made possible what many of us refer to as a dumb terminal or a serial terminal. Now, the first DRAM designs were done in the 1960s, around 65, but by 73 we had commercially available DRAM chips. And this is why in the 70s the serial terminal becomes the dominant display technology in business. Now, there are a ton of companies at this time get into the terminal game, but the two companies that really set the standard for these things were the two biggest computer companies of the time, IBM and DEC. In 71, IBM introduced the 3270, a terminal that all their later terminals would remain compatible with. In fact, there are still software implementations of the 3270 available for pretty much every operating system. PowerTerm might be the one you're fairly familiar with if you've used it. Also, a lot of IBM point-of-sale systems were based around 3270 as well. DEC also produced a number of terminals as well, starting with the VT05, then the VT52, and then the VT100, which kind of set the standard for most things going forwards then from the DEC point of view. In fact, DEC's VT standard is what your terminal software emulates on Linux, for example, when you load a shell window, or Mac. There's even something called Hyperterminal that ships with most copies of Windows. That's got VT terminal emulation in it as well. So, the way these terminals work is you connect them up to the computer, and in the case of DEC and most other terminal manufacturers, this was done using a serial port. Mostly. There are some other ways to connect it, and IBM's world is just, let's not get into S&A. But the VT220 you can see in front of you, that is connected via a serial port. So, via the serial port or whatever, the computer's able to stream data to the terminal, and the terminal's able to stream keyboard input back to the computer. Now, what the computer streams to the terminal is a mixture of just the text and numbers it wants to display on the screen, along with a number of control sequences for the terminal, usually known as escape sequences. These let you do things like change the foreground and background colour of the text. They may let you change the font, or whether it's italic, or whether it's bold. They can also move the text cursor around the screen so you can shift where text is going to be displayed to a different location on screen. You can erase characters that are on the screen. You can scroll the screen up or down, though not every terminal supports that. And on some terminals, you can even do fairly clever things, like on the 3270, you can send fonts to the terminal, your own custom designed fonts. So for example, an application could have its own graphics font, so it could do its own boxes and pop-outs and menus, and dialogues, for example. And some terminals just had their own built-in graphics character set for doing that too. Now, initially, every terminal vendor had their own proprietary set of escape sequences, and this created a bit of a problem for operating system vendors. Well, except for IBM, who couldn't be bothered at supporting anyone else's terminals. Which is why, for example, in Unix, you have the termcap library that sits between the operating system, which sends its own set of termcap control sequences, and then termcap produces the ones for whichever terminal it thinks you're currently set on. That's why in a modern Unix environment, like Linux for example, if you export all your variables, you see there's one entitled term that tells it what terminal type you're currently on. Now, fortunately, a standard for terminal control codes actually came into existence thanks to ANSI, and this is what the VT100 terminal implemented, and is one of the reasons why it's so successful. This ANSI terminal standard would also later get used by bulletin board systems in order to control how text was displayed to users. Now, I'm temporarily going to just park this whole text terminal thing for a moment or two, and we're going to look back again at the vector display side of things again. Why teletypes have been busy developing into terminals, the world of vector displays was not completely unchanged. They had also followed a path as well. Now, initially, these displays, like the one in the DEC PDP-1, that needed to keep a list of vectors in the machine's memory so that the system could keep redrawing those vectors on the screen. However, much like the teletypes moving into the glass TTY phase, companies developed external units that could go outside of the machine that had their own memory that could keep that vector list going. So for example, IBM created the 2250, which was an external unit with its own optional buffer that could drive 4 vector CRTs. That way the vector list could remain outside of the main computer's memory, and 4 users could simultaneously use their vector displays. And that unit only cost $280,000 in 1970. So that's 288 simultaneously use their vector displays. And that unit only cost 4 users could simultaneously use their vector displays. And that unit only cost $280,000 in 1970. So that's $280,000 in 1970s money. I told you memory was expensive back then. But from this version of the unit, it evolves further and we start getting vector terminals that are much more like the serial terminals you'd see during that 70s time period. One of the most significant from this period was the Tektronix 4010. Unfortunately, I don't have one to show you, so you'll just have to deal with these nice photos I've found of it. Now, to keep a number of vectors displayed at the same time, this would still need an awful lot of memory even when we start getting into DRAMs. But that's not how these terminals work. If you remember the Williams-Kilburn tune we mentioned at the beginning of the video, the memory storage technology using CRTs, well, these terminals work kinda like that. Now, I'm not going to go into the physics of how this works, but basically, when a line is drawn on the screen, it stays there in these terminals. This means there doesn't have to be a circuit constantly refreshing the display, and thus no need for a list in memory of what to draw. Lines drawn on the screen will stay on the screen whilst there's still power. Now this creates the unfortunate side effect that you can't just stop a line from being drawn on the screen simply by not drawing it the next time it needs refreshing. In fact, to remove a line, you have to blank the whole screen and then draw everything else again. So it really does work like an Etch-a-Sketch. But because of this lack of need for RAM, or at least RAM in a conventional sense, the resolution of these monitors could be incredibly high. They're really not that far off what you could do with a modern 4K display, just, in 1970. With the limitations of an Etch-a-Sketch. Now these things are still not cheap by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a lot more affordable than $280,000. Their widest use case is probably for CAD design at this point, although you do start to see them appear in the television and film industries. Because there isn't a refresh cycle like there is in a conventional CRT TV, when you film these things, or film them with a video camera, they don't appear to flicker. This means they're great for having on set where you want some computer display in the background. So for example, here's a photograph of the bridge set from Battlestar Galactica, well, the 70s version. And there are a few of these Tektronix terminals on set so they have a computery look going on. If you're a filmmaker wanting to include some wireframe animations, well, you can display that on the terminal, photograph it, blank it, do the next frame, keep going. So these storage tubes played a pretty essential role in early computer graphics on film and TV. Now to this point I need to change focus again. So far, everything we've been discussing has been in the world of mainframes and mini-computers, but at the beginning of the 70s, thanks to the sudden existence of microchips and DRAMs, and of course the microprocessor, we get the microcomputer. Unlike all the other areas of computing we've discussed so far, where it was driven largely by academia, research institutes, business, the microcomputer really starts to get driven more by hobbyists than anyone else, or at least in the early years. The early machines at the beginning of the 70s, they pretty much tend to be made by the person who's using it, or be built using some form of reference design published in a magazine, and sometimes even kits that people have purchased. The first companies to start making the machine that you can actually buy as a complete computer ready to go are the likes of Altair, SWTPC, and MSI. Now these computers are just pure computers, like a mini computer is. There's a central processing unit, and some memory, and a bus, and that is about it. There is no display built into these things. After all, it's hard enough to make and sell a computer at this point, never alone worrying about things like displays, let alone graphics. So this is where the teletype gets a second life. If an early microcomputer user wants to interact with this machine, and do slightly more than just toggle the switches on the front, they're gonna need a device like a teletype. So that's what people use. It's easy enough to add a serial port to these things, and then you can connect your teletype, and suddenly you've got a way of interacting with the machine. You can input text, numbers, etc., and get stuff displayed back to you. And if you've got one of the want of a paper tape reader, well, that suddenly gives you a way to load and store programs. This, for example, is why early versions of Microsoft Basic came shipped on paper tape. It's also why text adventures like Colossal Cave managed to gain a really big following at this period, because people had the kind of display technology that works well for text adventure. I mean, try doing Pac-Man on a typewriter. Of course, as the 70s progresses, serial terminals become a lot more affordable, and you see people switching over to using those over teletypes, and they create basic cassette audio interfaces that let them save their programs onto audio tape and retrieve them that way. Now, use of serial terminals and TTYs still remains relatively common as we go through our single board computer phase when you get the likes of the KIM-1. You also find quite a few people hooking these things up to Sinclair's Mark XIV and Acorn System 1 as well. But there becomes a growing awareness that in the world of the microcomputer, you've got a lot of what, well, a terminal can do already in there. What you're missing is a few basic components to allow it to do both jobs in one box. And this is what we see starting to emerge. First with third parties developing cards to put into those early micros that happen to have a bus you can stick cards into, like the Altair, that have a bit of additional memory on there, and a number of the ICs that you might see deployed in a serial terminal, like a character generator and a CRT controller. With the addition of a basic RF modulator, well, then you can get this thing to drive your television. Then people start thinking to build this stuff directly into the computer. Now you can see this example of the Apple I board. The Apple I is a super primitive version of this idea, which is probably one of the reasons why they didn't stick with it for very long. But the bottom half of this board, the 2 rows of ICs you can see, that's the computer. The top half of this board, the next 2 rows of ICs you can see, well, that's the serial terminal. And you can see where they link one to the other with a serial port in the middle of the board. However, in 1977, we get a number of machines released that have a much more sophisticated version of this idea. And that's in the form of the TSR-80, the Apple II, and the Commodore PET. Although all of these machines are still pretty heavily focused on text. For example, the Commodore PET can't do anything other than text. If it wants to do graphics, it actually uses a series of graphic characters to do graphics, known as PETSCI. The TSR-80 has a similar scheme known as semi-graphics, which again uses a custom set of characters to kind of emulate pixels. The Apple II can also work that way in what's known as its low-res mode, but it is the only one of the 3 that actually has some, well, what we think of as modern raster graphics. As the 70s marches on, more and more companies start making microcomputers, all with different display hardware. Now, for the only common micro operating system of the time, CP/M, this creates a bit of a headache. Initially, all it had to worry about was text. And CP/M had a way of dealing with that. It just assumed you had attached a terminal that was ASCII compatible, and every unique model of computer had its own bit of software known as the BIOS that did the abstractions, how to get in and out of the serial port, that sort of thing, and get the text displayed. Now, this worked really well for the majority of text-based applications on CP/M, where you just wanted to get some basic text on the screen. Where an application wanted to do something a little bit more sophisticated, well, often it would come with a configuration program, where you could input the escape sequences for your particular terminal to achieve something. Often the manual will come with examples for the common terminals, like an ANSI-compatible VT100 or a Y60. As computers started to build this stuff in, well, they would emulate the common ANSI terminal escape sequences as well. This is where you get machines starting to get into the whole, we're a business computer because we do 80-column mode stuff, because that's what a VT100 terminal would do. Hence Commodore and Commodore 128 and its CP/M compatible mode, and the fact that they really boasted about that they could do 80-column mode in it. But as the 70s wore into the 80s, and more machines started to be able to do bitmap graphics, well, this created a bit of a problem for CP/M. They did not have a good way to deal with that. If you wanted to do graphics in CP/M, you had to write your graphics code for one particular computer. That meant if someone with a different model of computer took your CP/M program and it did graphics, well, it wouldn't run on that other computer. You'd have to do a special version for that machine. And that killed the big feature of CP/M, which is I could buy a CP/M application and I could run it on any CP/M compatible machine that had the same processor that that application was written for, the most common one being a Z80. Now eventually CP/M did come up with a solution to this problem, a standardized graphics extension they could run across multiple machines, known as GSX. The problem for CP/M was it was all a bit too little, a bit too late. The problem is, while they were working on this, IBM had created their PC and was starting to ship MS-DOS with it. And as the PC started to take over the market, so did DOS. And this burgeoning market for multiple vendors running CP/M, supplying the business market, died surprisingly quickly, eventually to be replaced by IBM PCs and IBM PC clones running MS-DOS. Of course, MS-DOS also had a text terminal legacy it needed to deal with. Initially, DOS used its own control characters to control its own text output, but soon by version 2 it shipped with ANSI.sys, which I know most of you MS-DOS users would have loaded without thinking what it is, and that enabled you to do the ANSI control sequences to manage how your text output worked, which made porting your software to DOS a lot easier. Now, we're briefly going to step away from the world of microcomputers for a second, because while all this development had been going on in the microcomputer space all the way through the 70s into the beginning of the 80s, well, the terminal graphics world had not stood still. Text terminal vendors really started to get maybe a little bit jealous of the vector terminal people and also the microcomputer people, decided that they needed their terminals to be able to do graphics as well. Now you may be thinking, why bother? Surely the microcomputer's just going to take over, right? The IBM PC exists, or is about to. Well, no, mini computers stayed around for a really long time. Most major business applications were already running on this. Microcomputers got their foot in the door in business mostly through small businesses or very small departments needing just a little bit of computing, or companies that really hadn't embraced computing in any way up until this point. So it's very much in the interest of mini computer vendors to keep developing on and improving terminals. So in 1981 we get the first of these graphic standards, Regis, introduced in 1981 by DEC and their VT125 terminal. This is a series of control codes they introduced that allow you to do vector graphics, so you could do lines, curves, fills, text, etc. all on one screen. Now this was great for plotting graphs for example, but was not exactly rapid as a display technology, and you were definitely not going to be able to play Pac-Man on this thing. Not that DEC was wildly concerned about that. Regis also allowed for colour graphics on a number of terminals as well, so you could draw your lines and vectors etc. in different colours. You could even do your fills in different colours too. Now this was not DEC's first foothold into doing graphics on terminals. They did have something called Waveform before this, but I think that was fairly short-lived and they didn't keep that going in their terminal line. Regis replaced that. The next major change to terminal displays was that of Sixel. Originally DEC had developed this for their printers as a way of doing bitmap graphics to a printer. You sent 6 pixels at a time, hence Sixel. They then introduced this to their terminal line, which meant that finally terminals could do bitmap graphics. And on some terminal versions it could even do colour bitmap graphics. In fact, as terminal emulation's gone on, we can go quite a high resolution and 24-bit colour with this stuff, so it can do quite sophisticated graphics in the Sixel format. Not that the terminals of the time could do that. But by the mid-1980s, terminals and computer graphics, at least in business machines and home micros, were more or less on par. Where the big difference was that of bandwidth and latency. The problem with a serial terminal is the serial bit. Serial interfaces are not particularly rapid, and with the display being quite far away from the machine, also there's a degree of latency there. Bandwidth between the CPU and RAM is pretty darn high, especially compared to a serial link. And also it's really nearby to the CPU, so the latency is very, very low. So while a home micro and a terminal could display similar sort of things, a home micro could animate that stuff much more effectively, hence video games were possible. It's not like they were impossible on a terminal, but yeah, they're a lot more playable than an actual micro and a localized display. The main economic reasons for having terminals as well, that was starting to go away. Cost-wise, it was becoming realistic to put a computer on everybody's desk, rather than having one computer you're trying to share between multiple users. Also, RAM has now dropped to the price where having some inside the computer being used to run the display, that's not unreasonable now. However, there is one last gasp of this terminal approach to doing things, and that's called X Windows. Various Unix workstation and mini-computer vendors needed a way to have a GUI. Previously they'd all been using serial terminals and teletypes as their display devices, but obviously the latency and bandwidth really wasn't going to cut it for doing a GUI even for the best of serial terminals. And the solution that most Unix vendors adopted, and also VMS, was X Windows. The design of X Windows kind of still embraces the terminal idea, in that part of their design case was they were going to still allow for X terminals to exist.
What the Hey, little buddy. Hey, little buddy. Yo, buddy, you know how you like to wake me up sometimes? Wake up. Wake up. You know how you like to wake me up sometimes, buddy? Come over here, honey, buddy. Yeah, you come over here. Come over here towards me. That's right. If you want to lay down like this, you can lay down. Just fall asleep with Papa. Okay? Learning about some nerd stuff. Oh, learning about computers.
So still connect back to a bigger machine. Let's have a look at how it works. Now, the big central part of X Windows is the thing known as the X server. The X server handles the display itself and also keyboard and mouse input. Any application wanting to use X Windows connects to the X server, and using the X protocol, it sends what it wants displayed to the X server. And the X server sends back any input related events like key activity or mouse clicks. So this thing works very much in the same sort of vein as a serial terminal, only instead of things happening over a serial line, it's now generally happening in IP packets instead over a local area network. I can run an X server locally, and I can have applications locally talking to that X server. But likewise, I can log into a remote machine and run my X application there and it will talk back to my display. Or I could just be using an X terminal device that runs no applications locally, it's just an X server. In fact, my university did have a couple of those that were still around in the mid-90s, and they worked about as well as you think they might. X even included a protocol to allow X terminals to go discover servers that they might want to log on to. But X was not immune to the latency and bandwidth problems we discussed earlier for serial terminals. Yes, there was a lot more bandwidth, but it's not like everyone didn't know about the problem. But it did fit this terminal-like model that Unix was already using. But a few Unix versions just ignored the idea of X Windows completely and went their own way. For example, the Next Step operating system from Next, the thing that would eventually become part of Apple, that used display PostScript locally, so it didn't actually bother with X Windows. SGI kind of also ignored the X Windows thing too. Now, other operating systems for various micros like Windows, Amiga OS, RISC OS, etc., they much more closely coupled how graphics worked with what the application was doing. Essentially, they put a library in place that you would call, and that would do the drawing into main system memory, and the chips would just go at that. Now, this meant you didn't have any of the remote features where the application ran and where the application displayed its output were one and the same machine. Later on, we would get systems that would read back out again of screen memory to produce an image that could be sent over a network, but that came a bit later. This would speed things up considerably for those applications, because we don't have the latency issues because there's a lot less cruft in the way even when running locally, and we have a lot more bandwidth because we're just writing directly into memory effectively. This very close coupling also between applications and local hardware meant it's a lot easier to take advantage of any hardware acceleration our graphics hardware happens to provide. Because as the 80s goes on, graphics chipsets in computers cease being just dumb frame buffers, or at least they do outside of the world of PCs, and start having features like hardware sprites, hardware accelerated line drawing, hardware memory copy. Now, all these features are very useful for video games, which is what's driving quite a lot of this stuff, but also for GUIs. For example, the memory copy feature, that gives you a way of doing hardware accelerated window dragging. Sprites can be used for your mouse pointer. And all of this hardware acceleration continues apace until we get the next big major change in display technologies. Now, I'm not going to go into this one in detail because, well, this video's gone on long enough, and the history of 3D hardware in computing definitely can be its own video at some point. But suffice it to say, SGI had introduced quite a lot of 3D graphics technology, and suddenly in the mid-90s, that became available to regular PC users, thanks to companies like 3DFX. And this probably was the last straw to the old-fashioned world of X. So in the new release of X Windows, it gained a new extension that allowed an application to set up a shared memory buffer with the X server, and it would just put stuff into that memory buffer, and the X server would display it. Well, okay, there are some caveats around that. You can look at the X fixes and X damages extension for that stuff. Also, obviously, the application and the X server need to be running on the same machine for that to work, although that was the majority use case by this point in time. So for people using X this way, the X display worked a lot more like graphic displays of other computers did, like in the Windows or Mac OS. The X server had now just become essentially a pretty bad piece of RPC with weird locking issues. Hence the effort in the Linux world to shift over from using X Windows to Wayland, that's been going on now for the last 10 years or so. Because essentially X's design model doesn't really work for the modern world and hasn't done for a long time, but we've managed to paper over quite a lot of the cracks for a surprisingly long period of time. It's interesting to note that the other big Unix flavour out there, that of Mac OS X, doesn't use and never has used X Windows. Well, this is drawing us towards the end of what I'm going to cover in this video, and if your favourite display technology wasn't in here, and there are a few I've not brought up, as I try to just concentrate on the main sweeping trends that were going on, then I am sorry, but if you think it's particularly interesting, make a comment in the section below and I might well do a video on it at some point in time. The other
If you're an enjoyer of peacetime and you want this entire thing to be put to rest ASAP, then there's only one way to read this, right? And which is Donald Trump is retreating. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing at all. Obviously, it's devastating for like American force projection capabilities, American military posture, what this says about like where America will
I think as computer enthusiasts, we've probably all been through this at least once. We get all wrapped up like planning and building a sick new gaming rig, and we're like super excited. And then we realize as we're plugging it into all of our old peripherals that maybe it would have been wise to save some of our budget to upgrade the rest of the experience. Oops. So today's video is gonna be something a little special. We are going to be attempting to take this broken monitor, which we got on eBay, I guess?
eBay.
For $120 and make it a fully functional Aorus AD27QD, which is a $600 US monitor new, with this replacement panel that we also got on eBay.
Oh, that one was AliExpress.
Oh. What would you say our success chances are today?
They're either like 100% or it just doesn't work. It's like all or nothing.
Speaking of all or nothing, check out Glasswire. The offer all the time. Actually, look it out. So, usually as simple as searching a gaming monitor for parts or broken or damaged gaming monitor, and you should have a whole bunch to choose from. Now, we went with this one for a couple of reasons. Number one is that it's a pretty darn nice monitor. We actually reviewed it a while back. It's only FreeSync, but it's one of the few FreeSync models that NVIDIA actually signed off on as a G-Sync compatible. So it's a pretty no compromises experience. And it's got a bunch of great features. 2560 by 1440 resolution, HDR support, 1 millisecond response time. What else has it got? IPS panel. It's a pretty sick monitor, especially for 120 bucks. Now, should we fire this thing up and see what happens?
Sure.
I can't think of any reason not to.
Might as well just make sure that it
Yeah,
is
who knows?
actually broken.
Maybe we got a working monitor for 120 bucks.
So once you find a broken monitor that you like on eBay, I'd recommend finding that you can actually get the panel that you want before pulling the plug, obviously. So go on something like Panel Look and search your monitor model number, and then you'll be able to find the panel number, which you can then put into AliExpress or somewhere similar, and find out how expensive that's going to be to get it shipped to you. I'd recommend getting something from Acer, Asus, or LG. They seem to be the easiest ones to get panels for. Samsung, I just had no luck for at all. Same with Alienware.
How lucky are you feeling today?
In this situation, like 0.
Is this powered on? Seems to be powered on. It's detected. So, and it's cracked.
Yep. That's definitely broken.
That's a Kraken. Oop. Actually, since we have it here, sanity check. Nope. Stand seems to be just fine. No, this is actually like a super decent monitor. So it's been a while, but I think with these no bezel ones, you kind of have to pry this up. Is that right? Do you know how to disassemble this?
No, I couldn't find anything on disassembly. It is pretty new.
The good news is we don't really have to worry about
damaging
being
the
careful
panel.
with it. Yeah. Oh, I'm making progress. You want a real man screwdriver?
Nope.
I don't think that suction cup's gonna help. Oh, here we go. That sounded like a couple clips broke, but
Yeah, this is
better
like,
broken than engaged. Hey!
it's really in there.
Maybe it doesn't need to come out.
Well, like when we're done, if you're able to use the menu, that would be pretty great.
I think they're just really, really big clips. Hey, nice. Now it's coming out. Trust us, we're professionals. We've got some attachment doodads here. What are they called again?
Chummies?
Yeah.
No, I'd give that a solid like C+ for cable routing.
So now things should get a little bit simpler. We've just got a handful of screws to remove. I mean, is this the point where we should pop out our replacement panel and see if it even physically looks like it might go in here?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I get more concerned than you because I'm typically the one paying for them.
Well, like, the idea of this was that in the end, I just want to buy it. Because I'm
really?
cheap, so.
Oh, so we're building your monitor right now.
Basically, yes.
Oh. Wow, how'd you pull that scam off?
That was literally like the entire idea for the video. I was just like, I'm too cheap to buy a monitor.
So this looks really close.
Yeah, that looks right.
So this one, guys, we're only laying it down like this because it does have a protective covering on it. But this little piece of the housing here looks identical. This PCB looks the same. All these mounting points look the same. I'm not saying that makes this a guarantee. I'm just saying that makes our chances a lot better than if they weren't the same. Okay, so as long as this is functional, this should work. Now, some of this stuff, we don't even have to detach necessarily.
Actually, how is that even attached?
Oh, it's just taped on. That's pretty typical.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know, right?
Really?
I know, because it has
Wow,
like
what?
mounting holes on it. No, that I've seen this before, I swear.
Huh. In doing the research for this, I was actually shocked at how simple it is to just make your own monitor.
Maybe that's the next stage.
Yeah.
Try to salvage this tape if you can, because there's no real reason not to reuse it. Oh, boop. Okay. That's the part where if I accidentally bridge some of these contacts, because I'm sure there's some pretty decent sized capacitors on the other side, I could die.
That's fun.
Okay, you were paying attention to where this was routed, right?
Yeah, it goes down to here.
So this right here is the cable that carries the data from the display controller and scaler, this unit here, to the panel itself. So we don't want to bung this up. That's presumably kind of hard to find a replacement for.
Oh, yeah.
So there's pretty much no point removing this tape from the plastic frame because we just want to slide our new panel right in and then lay the tape back down, pretty much.
Yeah.
Remember that LGA 3647 motherboard you broke?
Oh, yeah, that was rough. Actually, that wasn't rough. Had one to us like the next day.
That doesn't make it good. So that's it. The training wheels are off. There's no protector on the panel now.
Yep. All right. That was relatively simple.
I kind of wish we'd taken a picture before we took everything apart, but honestly, it should be fine. Okay, so that seems to be cable routed.
Yeah.
This one I think goes in here. Yeah, get that lined up just right so that we can tape it on. There's like a ridge here.
Yes.
See how it kind of settles in there? So I'm ready to put in the other side of our ribbon cable. It's not too delicate of an operation compared to working within like a notebook or something like that. There, maybe you could give me a piece of tape to hold it down. This has been too easy. I'm getting concerned.
Yeah. Well, the same thing happened the last time we replaced a panel. We just popped it apart, smacked it back together, and we were like, okay.
So that's it. Theoretically, this is assembled now.
Should we test it before we bother putting it totally back together?
I was about to ask you the same thing. I kind of like the drama better if we reassemble the entire thing. Okay, want to line me up here? Oh, hold on, I got a few cables to put in.
Yep.
Gotta hook up that RGB.
Yeah, those are really important ones.
All right, do you remember how this went in? I think it slid, the bottom had to go in first, right?
Yes.
Okay. There we go.
Come on. Oh, there we go.
See how many of these clips we didn't break? Actually, there's not that many clips broken. What are you even talking
Yeah.
about? This is on here perfectly fine.
Yeah, it's pretty good. No one's gonna be able to tell.
All right, here, I might as well plug this in here since you're holding it.
Like,
Ah, ha, 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 ha.
no, no.
Hey. Is the panel on?
Yeah, it was briefly. Can we put it on the stand?
Yeah.
It's just like kind of difficult.
There you go. Okay, so far, the RGB is working both on the back of the monitor and on the stand. That's a good sign.
I don't know that this has DisplayPort 1.4, so it probably won't be able to do the full thing, but...
That's fine. We can go get a gaming rig to test it properly if it actually works.
How do I even display on this? There we go.
See, theoretically it's on. Uh-oh.
No?
Could it be that there's more wrong with it than we thought? Oops, I think I just turned it off. I mean, that's the thing about a broken product, is it could be broken in more than one way. Do you know that your mini DP works?
It's worked in the past. Let's get something else. What pump is this?
Oh, that's Corsair's new one.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's their Hydro X one. It's actually made of like clear nylon. So it's like super like durable and won't stain and stuff or something.
Cool.
I gotta tell you, I'm having doubts.
So I guess this is the moment where you find out if I get a monitor or if you get a monitor. Yes!
Yes! Just like that. Okay, we need a keyboard and mouse then.
So does this thing work? It'd be pretty unfortunate just to have like a crosshair. Oh, nice. Dashboard.
One potential snag right now is we can see it's clearly running at 60 hertz. So we don't know if that's because it can't run it more.
Yes!
Yeah, I would wait until I actually see it running.
Yay!
Not too shabby. Huh. All right, let's grab Dead Pixel Buddy.
Yeah, this is kind of like the second moment of truth right here.
So the thing is, guys, just because you got a compatible panel doesn't necessarily mean that it's an A panel. Maybe you got not an A panel.
Oh. Oh, okay.
No, that one was fine. Just a piece of dust. Okay, black looks good. So we want to turn it green so we can look for something like a red pixel that's standing out to us.
Looks good.
Mm-hmm. I don't see any blue pixels standing out, no dead ones.
No.
Oh, what's that?
I think that might be a dead red pixel.
Bummer. I'd say you actually did pretty well here.
Yeah.
Yep, I think you've got a dead red subpixel. So he's got 1/3 of a dead pixel on the whole panel and it's not right in the center.
So one thing that's also really possible here is that the calibration could just be completely off. I'm gonna take the time to actually use our display calibrator and put it on here, but for anyone else, a pretty good method is to just take a piece of paper, put it up there, change the RGB values in your monitor OSD, and boom.
I'd love to know if G-Sync works though. That's interesting.
What?
It didn't pick up G-Sync compatibility.
What drivers are on this?
They could be old, actually. So one odd behavior is that I noticed a little bit of fringing on the display earlier, and it turns out that it's running at 4K, even though this is a 1440p panel, but then it knew to run it at 150% scaling. So everything looked the right size, but there's a little bit of, there's some artifacts on text, so it doesn't look crisp. We're gonna get the graphics driver installed though, and that should fix that. Okay, moment of truth time here. Set up G-Sync!
Woo!
All right, freaking awesome.
So I guess that right there is kind of why this is a good idea as opposed to just buying a cheap monitor. Because this is, in the end, with the panel and the broken monitor, it's slightly more expensive than just buying a 1440p 144 hertz display.
Yeah, the original plan was we were gonna get the panel for closer to like, what, 150, 180 bucks?
Yeah, it was like 140.
And the whole solution was gonna be about $300. But now, what did we end up with?
Yeah, so it's been like 2 months. The order was canceled 3 times. And in the end, we paid more like $300 for the panel.
So that's still $180 less than new for a very respectable G-Sync compatible gaming monitor. And what, 45 minutes of time?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, for the actual upgrade, not the doing all the research.
Well, the research was pretty quick too. The 2 months of canceled orders on AliExpress weren't too fun.
So this is your new monitor then?
Yeah. See, there's good ideas for videos, and then there's good ideas for videos that are also because I'm really cheap. Don't include that.
I think that's fine to include.
That looks good.
Not bad. Not bad at all. I need a better gun. Blah, 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 blah. Do they have headshots?
I think on those, if you get them like when their mouths open, it's extra damage.
Ah, okay. This is awesome. You should try it.
All right.
Speaking of awesome and things you should try, FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the small business accounting solution built for how you want to work. So whether you're a freelancer or a small business owner, it's a simple way to be more productive, more organized, and to get paid faster. With FreshBooks, you can create and send professional-looking invoices in less than 30 seconds. You can set up online payments to get paid up to 4 days faster. You can see when your client has seen your invoice to put an end to the guessing games, and you can take the whole experience with you on the go with their fully featured apps for iOS and Android. So check it out at freshbooks.com/techtips and make sure you enter Linus Tech Tips in the How Did You Hear About Us section. So thanks for watching, guys. If you disliked this video, you can hit that button, but if you liked it, hit like, get subscribed, or maybe consider checking out where to buy the stuff we featured at the link in the video description. Also down there is our merch store, which has cool shirts like the one I'm wearing. This is our Elemental shirt. And, oh yeah, also this hoodie. And our community forum, which you should totally join. Why in the world would you ever want to build your own monitor? I mean, there are already a ton of good, cheap monitors out there that would be as good or better than something that you build yourself. In fact, we showed off a few of them recently. Well, the answer lies not necessarily in using this puny little screen as your main display, but rather in giving it a new lease on life as a secondary or even like tertiary display. And the best part is, if you're anything like me and you hoard a bunch of old technology, you may already have a panel that's just waiting to be reclaimed from an old laptop or a tablet. So today, we're gonna show you just how easy it is to make your own monitor from just a couple of cheap parts and a little bit of creativity. Speaking of creativity, how creative is this segue to our sponsor, Ridge Wallet? Ridge Wallet is a sleek way to keep wallet bulge down with their point stub is an embed that you would find in a typical desktop monitor. So this here, the next 6-inch IPS panel with a resolution star of the show, the panel. So ours here is probably something you've seen before. It's a super common 15.6-inch IPS panel with a resolution of 1920 by 1080. Next up is something you probably haven't seen before. This right here is an embedded DisplayPort controller, which is roughly analogous to the scaler module that you would find in a typical desktop monitor. So this here converts the HDMI signal that's coming out of your graphics card into a signal that the panel here can understand. So we purchased both our LCD and our EDP adapter from eBay. But guys, before you go out and buy a screen, take a look on Craigslist or at local electronics recyclers like FreeGeek and see if you can find something that doesn't need to be shipped. You might be able to score a deal and get some of that bonus karma for keeping a perfectly good screen from going to waste. Wherever you get your panel, once you've got it, the first thing you're going to want to do is establish what specific connector it uses. So the most common connector that you're going to find on 1080p panels like this one is a 30-pin EDP connector like the one I'm holding here. Now, if you do decide to harvest your LCD from a laptop or otherwise, make sure to verify that the connector on the back matches with the display adapter that you choose. Another word of warning, if you plan on using an old iPad or a MacBook, do a little extra research and make sure that you can even find an adapter for it. Apple has this tendency to use proprietary connectors for their displays. I know. I'm shocked. Moving on now then to the brains of the operation, our display adapter. Now, in addition to acting as a signal converter here, HDMI goes in there, this provides our on-screen display, which hopefully will allow us to adjust things like screen brightness, contrast, and all that kind of good stuff. It's really easy to gloss over how important this little driver is and even harder to believe that it only costs 20 bucks. Now that we've got all the components of our display figured out here, the next thing we need to do is be responsible and boot it up and make sure it works before we assemble the whole thing. Then we're gonna put it in that frame over there and try and use it as an actual monitor. The golden end goes into the bottom of the monitor, just like that. Just be careful when you're putting these in. These are quite fragile connectors. They're not intended, you know, like a USB plug to be unplugged and plugged back in and all that stuff. And then on the other side, we've got a little flip-up plastic piece here, and then our contacts go down so that they touch the pins on the inside of the connector. We slide it in and then lock it down like that. Oop. We do it a lot more evenly than that. That's better. We found this 12 volt 3 amp power adapter in a bin. Now, all I need is my laptop. All right, let's see. Hey, well that was painless. Look at that. I wonder if our OSD works. Menu. And it's in Korean. So with that out of the way, all we need now is this little baggie of 256 and 440 screws and nuts, this little knife here for cleaning up our 3D prints, this screwdriver for screwing everything together, and in the interest of completeness, this power drill that we actually only use just to, the clearances were a little tight on the holes for the on-screen display, so we loosened them a little bit and now it's fine, but I won't actually use that on camera. So for all the details on these parts, guys, you can check out the forum link in the description where we have all of the components, the 3D models, the fasteners, and where you can find them if you wanted to do something like this for yourself. Now, the real bulk of this project was actually getting all these parts printed. The design that we used is from Fox_EXE on Thingiverse, so we got to give huge kudos to him for a pretty well thought out design, especially how the back panels interlock with the EDP adapter case. With that being said, the design is clearly marked as being a work in progress, so we did find some areas that needed improvements, and we've uploaded the remix of his design for you guys to enjoy. So you'll need to print 17 parts in total, so be prepared to spend some time cleaning up 3D prints for this project, as between the successful ones and the less successful ones, there are probably going to be quite a few of them. So with all that out of the way, we're ready to build. So step number one for us is going to be assembling the base. Now, this was one piece that we did have to reassemble, and honestly, our solution, it's not perfect, but it's functional enough. So you go ahead and you pop the top of the stand in here, just, yeah, there we go. And then this loop right here kind of hooks onto it and holds it in place. If you want it to hold more securely, what you could do is put a big washer on here and then screw it in from this side and thread that through the 3D printed hole in the back. It'll just kind of self-tap in there. And that would hold it better, but honestly, our monitor's not heavy enough that we consider that to be an issue, so we're just gonna go ahead and pop that on there. Boom, stand, just like that. Next, we're gonna lay down our display panel, and we're gonna arrange these 4 pieces like so. You can tell the top pieces from the bottom pieces from the extra monitor. We can do that. Do they work? It's on here. There we go. And then this piece is a little bit finicky, guys, but yeah. All right, let's make sure that our buttons are all still exposed. All right, so we're using our, position our ports all in the corresponding holes. You can see that actually lines up quite nicely though. And then our ribbon cable through this gap here in the housing. Now that these are installed, we're gonna go ahead and flip it around like this. You can see there's a little notch here where the cables come out. One thing that'll help you get this lined up is, it's gonna be hard to see in the camera, but there's little guides to kind of lock all of these pieces in place. There we go. So theoretically, once they're all in there, it's not gonna move around too much and it should screw right in. Then we get these parts, which are gonna attach to our stand, and we put them on right here, and it's finally time to screw the thing together with hopefully all those holes aligned. And we're gonna use our long screws this time around. So now we can pick it up. You can see it's a little floppy there. That's why there's these clips. So these go on a little something like that, boop. And there it is, boop. And that for better or for worse, is a monitor now. A perfect monitor? No, don't be stupid. But it's a monitor. Now we're gonna take one of our 440 screws and we're gonna put it through here with a nut on the other side. We need quite a Okay, so that's, so you can actually sec. And did kind of call for side bezels, but they were either incomplete or we couldn't find them or some combination of the two. And all it would really serve to do is put a bigger bezel on it, so we just didn't really worry about it. We do have a bit of a problem though. Our brightness sucks. So fortunately, speaking of things that suck, our menu ain't great. Ooh,
Oops, sorry.
that button's jammed. Oh. Okay, we never said it was perfect. There we go. Okay, that's our brightness cranked. It would be really nice if I could find the English option. Hey, there it is. English. Yay! Fantastic. Okay, let's have a look at what options we have here. Dynamic contrast ratio, so basically it'll dim on darker scenes and brighten up on brighter ones. Eco mode, brightness contrast, and that's like basically it. Depending on what we're using it for a secondary display, maybe that's all we need. Hey, well that was painless. But all the component goes into the bottom of the monitor, just like the other side of the connector. We've got a little flip up plastic piece here. 3 amp, let's see. Now, need is my laptop. 3 amp power adapter in a bin. Now, all I need is my laptop. So with that out of the way, menu. And it's in Korean. So with that out of the way, all we need now is this little, the checkout design that we used is from box_exe on Thingiverse. So we got to give.
Hey, today we'll try and repair this very large Samsung Odyssey monitor type C49RG90 SSU. There is no picture on the screen, it's only the backlight that just pop it off. The backside, there's no screws, quite a lot. There's this cable coming through, and then the main process, we saw it, and we also control, okay. Already disassembled the cables here, and I will show you some of the measurements I made. The main board exposed, so we have this CPU is light turns on and off, and the button is to have the CPU is running, since we can turn on and off. Have the power rails and USB. So check. Okay, the fuse is good. Then I would like to test some of the capacitors and see if we so I'll just and connect it on both DC. Okay. 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 Okay, there's a problem here. We have these 5 capacitors here. There seems to be a short circuit. There's no color in the button. Volume capacitor, and just show you the data sheet here. 10 microfarads, and the monitor.
The only lights in the monitor. Next, I'll put in what's called the optical system, which makes the light even across. Engineers comes a
Alright, look, since y'all too lazy, this is the best way to fix your monitor.
So
grab any sort of cloth.
Or shirt,
anything.
rub on it. Hold on, give us some.
XDR. Probably can't tell just by looking at it on camera, but this is the new one. I've been testing it, staring at it for a few days now. This is not the most important product that's come out in the past couple weeks, let's be real, but I've been watching Apple and covering them for a while, and the decisions that they make and the decisions that they don't make. And I think the existence of this monitor as it sits actually tells us a lot more about what Apple's doing right now. See, this past week was actually a tale of two brand new displays from Apple. They dropped a barely updated regular studio display, which is the same design, same stand, same chassis, same 11-year-old panel, 27-inch 5K IPS LCD panel, but now with the new processor inside and new Thunderbolt 5 ports on the back, and it's for the same $1,600 price. It's a weird, good-looking, but weird monitor. And then this one, this is brand new. This is the Studio Display XDR, and so it's an upgraded, higher performing version of that. So it's still a 27-inch 5K monitor with the same great stand, but the panel, oh, the panel. This time, it's finally a mini LED display with 2,000 nits of peak HDR brightness and 120 hertz max refresh rate with adaptive sync support. And this display replaces the Pro Display XDR. So the Studio Display replaces the Pro Display. Studio replaces Pro. Okay, write that down. Write that down. So it turns out there's not really that much else to say about the panel itself. It is an awesome display, and at a technical level, it's actually better in every single way than the Pro Display XDR. It gets much brighter. It'll do 1,000 nits full screen in regular SDR mode. The Pro Display can only do 500. And it'll do up to 2,000 nits peak brightness in HDR versus the Pro Display's 1,600. And the mini LED backlight is giving us way more contrast control, 2,000 local dimming zones versus the Pro Display's 576. You can see it in a dark room with a black background video. The difference is insane. There's way less blooming, higher contrast ratios. It's actually not even really close. And then it also gains the extra Thunderbolt 5 port on the back, which is sneakily extremely useful. And it also adds a webcam and speakers that the Pro Display didn't have. And it's cheaper, which isn't saying much because you remember the Pro Display was $5,000. Pro Display didn't have. And it's cheaper, which isn't saying much because you remember the Pro Display was $5,000, and then the stand was an extra $1,000, and then the nano texture was another $1,000. But this better display starts at $32.99 and includes that stand. And nano texture is only $300 more. Side note, the nano texture thing they've been doing for some years now, I think it's just progressively getting better and better. It started on the Pro Display XDR a decade ago, and it was effective, but extremely difficult to clean. Like, I can't touch my Pro Display XDR without fear of leaving permanent marks on it. It's kind of insane. That also birthed the infamous Apple polishing cloth and its constantly updated compatibility list. But then they started bringing nanotexture to other displays. The MacBook Pro, for example, got nanotexture, and that's a little better. You could use different cloths on it and effectively clean it pretty well. And then they brought it to the iPad. So there's an iPad Pro with nanotexture, and that's obviously a touchscreen. So anyway, this is the nanotexture version on the desktop 10 years later. It did actually come with a note and a separate cleaning cloth, and the note says to only use this including polishing cloth to clean this, and it is a different polishing cloth than the previous Pro Display. So I think I can probably use other microfibers and not have any issue. And don't worry, if you're wondering, Apple did update the compatibility list for the old polishing cloth to include the new Studio Display. I know you were all holding your breath for that one. But last time I reviewed the Studio Display, I remember specifically pairing it again with my MacBook Pro and saying that even though this monitor is made for the Mac, it doesn't actually feel like it makes a great pair with the MacBook Pro because they don't match that well. The MacBook Pro is this nice high refresh rate mini LED display, and then your Studio Display is a 60 hertz LCD. But now the Studio Display XDR specifically is a much better pair with the MacBook Pro now. Now there are, as always, lots of other options for monitors that you could get to pair with your Apple computer, but the reason that a lot of people end up choosing the Studio Display, the Apple display, is because of how well it pairs with and works with the Mac. And that's not just aesthetics, though obviously being silver and metal is gonna be a factor, but it's also the one cable life. Like plugging in a single Thunderbolt 5 cable into the display at your desk and getting all your accessories to light up, everything else connected to all the other ports on the back of the display, including if you want another full-speed Thunderbolt 5 port to dock some really fast storage to the thing. You can even connect through that port to another Studio Display. So you can daisy chain up to 4 Studio Displays or 2 Studio Display XDRs together to the same MacBook Pro, all through one single cable. And then they'd all be matching as high refresh rate, high brightness, mini LEDs across the board, and it would be charging the MacBook Pro at 140 watts. So what do I mean when I say we're all pros now? What does that mean? Well, I did earlier say that Studio replaced Pro. You wrote that down, this thing. They literally still call it the world's best Pro display in big text. So they couldn't be more clear about Studio replacing Pro. But more importantly, this great display now is packaged like this, which is clearly an upgrade to the base version. There's the Studio Display and then the upgraded Studio Display. And that is easier to sell and easier to explain. It's easier to understand. And you know how much Apple loves their price ladders. Anyway, my main theory is that I don't think Apple really is interested in targeting the real pro, the professional market anymore. And this is probably a debate they've had many times internally, but that professional market is super small, it's super picky, and it is the least likely to be interested in their ecosystem stuff. So they'll dabble in really pro stuff once in a while. Mac Pro, sure, it exists. The Pro Display, obviously, but that's not really their bread and butter. Like they use the word pro, but most of the stuff that has the word pro in it, like the iPhone Pro or the MacBook Pro, is really high-end consumer devices that have like pro-level capabilities. And so the natural extension of this theory is that Mac Pro is doomed. Of course it's doomed. Like I said, like you wrote down, Studio replaces Pro. And we already have a Mac Studio now getting more regular updates than the Mac Pro. Mac Pro hasn't been updated since M2 Ultra back in 2023, and I'd be willing to bet that it doesn't get any more updates. But that's a tangent for another day. The point is, the word Studio replaces the word Pro at the very top of Apple's lineup. That is the most pro of any of the stuff you'll get from Apple, is when you see the word Studio on it. So, as someone who's been using a Mac Pro and a Pro Display XDR since they came out, the immediate first thought when I saw these announced was, should I be switching to the Mac Studio and the Studio Display XDRs? You know, I've gotten really used to these bezels. Not a disaster, it's still a lot of screen. So since everything else about it is better, I probably should be switching. But for everyone else out there who doesn't already have a Pro Display and is looking for the best display to pair with, say, their MacBook Pro, this is about as good as it gets. Like, as a video creator in this little studio we have here, this is more than pro enough for me. Like, I know there are Hollywood movie studios that don't even need a webcam built in, and they don't even need speakers built into their monitor because it just lives in an editing den all day, never does any FaceTime calls or any gaming or YouTube watching. But this is more of a mixed-use product that is sometimes used to edit videos, like the one you're watching, and edit photos like the thumbnail of this video, but then other times is used to make a video call or get on a virtual meeting, and then the perfectly average 1080p center stage webcam is nice to have in that case. And sometimes it might actually be used to just watch videos, listen to music, do other random stuff, and the speakers in here are still surprisingly good at that. They're like 16-inch MacBook Pro level, like impressive speakers for in this tiny chassis. You should probably still get dedicated speakers though. They're not even going to be in the same planet. But then the 120 hertz max refresh rate is great for animations and scrolling around, even gaming if you wanted to, something an actual professional reference monitor would almost never be used for. There really isn't much for me to compare this to. Like, I would love to look at other options for a 27-inch 5K 2000 nit HDR mini LED display with high refresh rate, but there aren't any. So when I also point out that the Thunderbolt 5 cable that it comes with is kinda on the short side, it's like 3 feet long, doesn't really seem to matter. Like, I'm sure the other reviews will also point out that the top gets just a little bit warm once it's been on for a little while. partially because it's a really big, bright display, also partially because there's literally an A19 Pro chip in here with 12 gigs of RAM just to run the webcam and speakers. There's no question other people will bring up that even though the power supply is built in speakers, there's no with 12 gigs of RAM just to run the webcam and speakers. There's no question other people will bring up that even though the power supply is built in, the power cable is still non-removable, which is still super strange and will make it a pain to get replaced. But at the end of the day, I do feel like if you want the best possible display to complement the MacBook Pro for that one cable plug-in and come to life desk setup, it's this one. Now, Apple, if you could just update the Mac Studio with like a M4, M5 Ultra soon as well, that would be very much appreciated. But either way, we've got a lot more coming up in Techtember. I mean, March. Somehow this became Techtember or Tech March, Tarch. It's Tarch. Stay tuned for many more videos coming soon because it's Tarch season. Catch you guys in the next one. Get subscribed. Peace.
The other day I saw an article of a gym that has a sushi bar on the gym floor. That is what I like to call heaven, but also a level 5 gym. It can't get much better than that, and I'm going. But before I go, I want to experience every level of gym before that so I can truly appreciate just how special level 5 is. So it's time to go all the way down to level 1. It can't get much worse than this. Like, this is a step above doing endless push-up variations in your mom's basement. So in Chicago, they have a fitness center in all the parks, and we are at Chase Park, the cheapest one in the entire city. It's only $10 a month, so I don't think it's possible.
This is a computer. Okay, now I just want to learn the history of displays. No, the history of displays. The history of displays.
This video is brought to you by Xiaomi and Mi Academy. Hi, welcome to another Cold Fusion video. In the last episode, we saw how Apple changed the consumer computing industry by using a desktop-class ARM chip in a laptop form factor, but also how Intel's CEO made one of the biggest mistakes in tech history when he refused to make chips for the iPhone. Today, we'll focus on another part of mobile technology, the screen. It's often taken for granted, but a screen acts as an interface to our device. We read text, watch movies, view images, touch, swipe. But where did all of this come from, and how did it all come to be? In this episode, we'll take a look at the history of display technology. I'll also have a chat with Daniel Distalius, who was involved in the Xiaomi Mi 10 T Pro phone, the phone that currently has one of the fastest refresh rate screens in the industry at 144 Hz. We'll discuss what it takes to design a mobile screen these days. Let's get into it.
You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
Do you remember those big and bulky monitors that were on every computer desk in the 80s and 90s, or maybe as the TV in your living room? These were called cathode ray tubes, or CRTs, and they're one of the earliest forms of electronic displays. Initially, they were used as oscilloscopes, before finding their way into TV applications and finally computers. The first commercially available cathode ray TV was produced in 1934 by the Telefunken company in Germany. It cost around $8,000 in today's money. By the commercially available cathode ray TV was produced in 1934 by the Telefunken company in Germany. It cost around $8,000 in today's money. After World War II, TVs would hit the mainstream. The first commercial color CRT was produced in 1954, so would hit the 8,000 to 9.
Wait, you telling me Nazi Germany came out with the first TV?
The first?
You're telling me like Kanye was right? Nazi Germany came out with the first TV.
Commercially available cathode ray
Or at least the first commercially available
TV was produced in 1934 by the Telefunken company in Germany. It cost around
Telefunken.
$8,000 in today's money. After World War II, TVs would hit the mainstream. The first commercial color CRT was produced in 1954 from RCA researchers. Commercial color After World War II, TVs would hit the mainstream. The first commercial color CRT was produced in 1954 from RCA researchers.
So it took all the way to 1954. We skipped a lot, but color TV in America, RCA.
The reason they were so heavy and bulky was that they consisted of an electron gun. The way it works is that these would fire electrons into an array of millions of tiny blue, green, and red phosphor-coated dots. The beam would fire horizontally, row by row, and when the tiny phosphor dots were hit by the beam...
That makes so much sense now. Photons hit the beam with certain colors, and now we produce an image.
They would glow.
Boom.
When you do this rapidly enough, you can form the illusion of a moving image. Despite being inefficient, large, and full of hazardous waste materials, CRT screens pretty much owned the 20th century as the display of choice. If you've ever looked at a calculator display, or an old watch face from the 80s or so, you would have seen a low-power liquid crystal display, or LCD, at work. The way these function is actually pretty interesting. They work on a principle called the twisted pneumatic effect. Basically, an electric field is used to align special liquid crystal molecules between two states. When the molecules are not aligned and twisted, it's an off state. But when a low voltage is applied, they line up and form an on state. By manipulating this effect, you can form basic numbers and letters. The twisted pneumatic effect was first noticed by a French physicist, Charles Victor Meguin, in 1911. But it would be line up and form an on state, off state, two state, and they work on a principle called the twisted pneumatic effect. Basically, an electric field is used to align special liquid crystal molecules between two states. When the molecules are not aligned and twisted, it's an off state. But when a low voltage is applied, they line up and form an on state. By manipulating this effect, you can form basic numbers and letters. The twisted pneumatic effect was first noticed by a French physicist, Charles Victor Meguin, in 1911. But it would be Wolfgang Helfrich, a physicist working for RCA in 1967, was first noticed by a French physicist, Charles Victor Meguin, in 1911. But it would be Wolfgang Helfrich, a physicist working for RCA in 1967, that had the idea to use this phenomena to make an electronic display. The RCA Corporation thought it was a dumb idea, so Wolfgang left and joined the Hoffmann-La-Roche lab in Switzerland. Together with some colleagues, he managed to build some working samples in 1970. Meanwhile, in America, a man by the name of James Ferguson was a liquid crystals expert who was also working on twisted pneumatic displays. He was working at the Westinghouse Corporation. In his job, he had a contract with the La-Roche Swiss lab, who came to know of his work. Upon hearing the news of James's experiments, the Swiss lab scrambled to file a patent. Ferguson would rush out a similar patent 2 months later. This resulted in a 3-year-long patent dispute that was eventually settled, resulting in millions of dollars in royalties from LCD screen use. In 1972, the first wristwatch featuring the technology was released. It was called the Gruen Teletime. Unlike other displays which could require 40 volts or more to run, this method used hardly any power, and this made them perfect for portable devices like pocket calculators or wristwatches, and as you'll soon see, modern LCDs. Most of you would know what an LED is. It's one of these. The basic principle is, when a current passes through them, they glow. As it turns out, you can use tiny molecules based on carbon to achieve the same effect. This is called an organic light emitting diode, or OLED. When you put millions of these together to form what are known as pixels, you get a modern OLED screen. As described earlier, LCD screens work by using the twisted pneumatic effect, and modern screens still use this technology but on a wider scale. And again, when you put millions of these together to form pixels, this is how we get our display technology. So here's a question. How do you control these things if you have millions of pixels on a screen? Well, as it turns out, there's a tiny transparent grid of wires with each pixel having 3 transistor switches. So why 3? Because within each pixel, there's typically 3 subpixels, a red, green, and blue one. These tiny transistors control the level of brightness of each subpixel by using a tiny voltage. To represent a single color, as per the instructions of a graphics driver, the transistor will vary the brightness of the green, red, and blue subpixel separately. Combine millions of these subpixels together, and you get an image. The fascinating thing is that the driver can only control one row at a time, but the speed at which the rows are able to update is so rapid that our eyes perceive it as one complete image. This technique is called an active matrix display and was first introduced by the Westinghouse Electric Corporation in 1974. The Macintosh Portable in 1989 was the first consumer laptop to employ an active matrix panel. OLED screens that use an active matrix are called active matrix OLEDs, or AMOLED. Both OLED and LCD were the 2 types of screens that would go on to dominate all consumer technology displays. So when you touch and navigate your phone, you can use 2 fingers to pinch and zoom or perform gestures. But it always wasn't this way. This technology is called capacitive multitouch. The origins of multitouch begin at CERN and a number of US and Canadian universities in the 1970s. CERN began using multitouch screens as early as 1976. Multitouch technology is capacitive as opposed to resistive, which was a kind of touch technology that you had to use force in order to register a touch. Think ATM screens. Early PDAs like the Apple Newton or Windows mobile devices used this kind of technology, making them clunky to use. It was the main reason why most of the public was skeptical of touchscreen devices at the time of the iPhone's release. Capacitive touch, on the other hand, uses the human finger as an electrical conductor, which causes an electrostatic change in the screen surface. This change can be measured and results in more accuracy than resistive methods. Between 1999 and 2005, the company Fingerworks developed multi-touch devices for those with wrist injuries and the disabled. One day in 2002, an Apple engineer who had broken her wrist brought one of the devices into the office to work. Other Apple engineers were fascinated, and Apple later ended up buying the Fingerworks company. This key technology eventually became used in the iPhone in 2007. Apple engineers with injuries and the disabled. One day in 2002, an Apple engineer who had broken her wrist brought one of the devices into the office to work. Other Apple engineers were fascinated, and Apple later ended up buying the Fingerworks company. This key technology eventually became used in the iPhone in 2007. You can see the full episode of that story in my video, The Struggle of the Original iPhone. And from here, we're all set for the modern day. There's other emerging technologies like mini LEDs, but we'll leave it here for today. Now that we've seen how we got to where we are today, let's look at the latest trend in mobile technology, high refresh rates.
Well, let me...
Developed multi-touch device 99 results in more accuracy. The company
Fingerworks multi-technology.
Developed...
That's so interesting. Fingerworks multi-touch technology. Baby, I was hoping you weren't gonna say anything about me eating so many of those chips. You're not gonna show what it does? Oh, right here we got pictures. I guess it's like a mouse pad. Oh, it's like a. First device at used.
And start to interact with it. I can zoom around. I mean, this image was made up of 1.5 billion pixels.
Wow.
It's 100,000 individual pictures stitched together. And I can start to play with this. I can climb the wall. I can see climbers in different spaces actually on the face. I can zoom back out. I can go.
What is this product called? What the heck is this? Yeah, I want to know what this does. Editing, gestures, game mode. Ooh, this is cool.
I'm going to just point my finger like this, and the cursor will appear, and I can control it just by moving my finger out this way and that way. To horizontally scroll, I'm going to do flicks with 2 fingers, both to the left and to the right, and there's also a click that gets me directly to the home screen. There's another gesture that will get me to the app switcher like that, and I can just scroll now through the app switcher with those same 2-finger flicks. The right click is just a 1-finger click to the right. To close this, I'll do a 1-finger click to the left, which is a left click. Then to open Safari, I'll left click on Safari. Then vertical scrolling is done just by flicking up and down, like that. And then if I want to go back into tapping mode, I just go to that field, put my hand flat, and I'll go like that. And I'm tapping, and that's it. Hi, this is David, and this is which indicates the finger, up, down, left, right. I can extend 2 fingers, I can scroll to the left, and then to the right. I'm going to just point my...
Bro, this band. There's incredible stuff right here. Turn your hand.
To multi-touch devices for those with wrist injuries and the disabled. One day in 2002, an Apple engineer who had broken her wrist brought one of the devices into the office to work. Other Apple engineers were fascinated, and Apple later ended up buying the Fingerworks company. This key technology eventually became used in the iPhone in 2007. You can see the full episode of that story in my video, The Struggle of the Original iPhone. And from here, we're all set for the modern day. There's other emerging technologies like mini LEDs, but we'll leave it here for today. Now that we've seen how we got to where we are today, let's look at the latest trend in mobile technology, high refresh rates. This basically updates the screen at more times per second, enabling smoother screen operation. The result is a device that feels faster and is more responsive. It's proved popular in the Android world and also on the iPad Pro, but the iPhone still hasn't adopted the technology. I'll bring in Daniel from Xiaomi to talk about the responsive. It's proved popular in the Android world and also on the iPad Pro, but the iPhone still hasn't adopted the technology. I'll bring in Daniel from Xiaomi to talk about it a bit more. For those of you not aware, Xiaomi is the third largest phone manufacturer in the world. We'll talk about some behind the scenes aspect of smartphone screen technology using their latest phone, the Mi 10T Pro, as a case study.
My name is Daniel. I am the Senior Product Marketing Manager for Xiaomi Global. I was in charge of the Mi 10T and Mi 10T Pro project. So when we made this display as one of our flagships, we decided that we wanted an industry-leading refresh rate. We wanted to be really power efficient. We wanted to have industry-leading color performance, and above all else, especially for me personally, but this is something that we worked on really hard for this, we wanted really like a really healthy experience for the eyes. So we set out with these 4 goals in mind. From there, we designed the hardware that's going to enable this. And then from that, so we're building on pillars here. We're building on the user need, we're building on the hardware that will support it, and then we build the software that will support that will enable this and make the best use of content that you're going to be doing.
In order to save battery life, Xiaomi has a technology called Adaptive Sync, which has 7 stages from 30 Hz all the way up to 144 Hz.
So rather than forcing 144 Hz, no matter what you're looking at, if let's say you're looking at a still image, 144 Hz isn't doing anything for you there, but it's still consuming the same amount of battery life because you're refreshing more than twice the times per second compared to 60. By lowering the amount of times that the refresh rate or the screen refreshes per second, you're lowering the battery consumption. Overall, for us, this has contributed to 8% more battery life.
The phone actively analyzes what's being seen on the screen in order to choose the most optimum refresh rate.
So the hardware has absolutely no idea. And this is an issue that I believe other providers have been having. But the software is constantly taking a look at what you're watching. So if you're watching a video, it knows that it's 24, it's 25, it's 30, or it's 60 FPS. So it's analyzing that. It's analyzing what you're doing and deciding what refresh rate to use intelligently.
The company has actually built in-house software for evaluating if the phone is correct in what refresh rate it chooses for various content. And I think this is a pretty solid idea.
So it's checking both, are we refreshing at the right rate, and is the content being displayed at the right rate?
Also, in my opinion, I'm not sure how many people would notice the difference between 144 Hz and 120 Hz, but I can see a slight difference when it's lowered to 90 Hz, and regular 60 Hz screens now just feel choppy. Another screen technology Daniel and I talked about was reading mode. Reading Mode 3.0 is the latest iteration of a screen technology that intelligently adjusts the screen's output to reduce eye strain and maximize eye protection.
Eye health is actually like a pretty core concern. I think a lot of people, myself included, we spend 6+ hours per day on a screen. One of the most dangerous things for our eyes, for like our natural rhythms and our sleeping schedules, is blue light. So first, we added a 360-degree light sensor. One of these is under the display and the other under the camera module. What this does is analyze ambient lighting and adjust to determine optimum brightness, so that your phone isn't blinding you while you scroll in dark conditions. Now finally, we optimize our reading mode to reduce blue light. This is done on the software end. And this even offers a paper reading mode, which is similar to the conditions that are achieved by modern e-readers. No, I think it's definitely a possibility. Current technology has a few steps before it's going to get to this point. I think it really depends on which way you want to move with that, right? Do you want to take current e-ink displays and do you want to evolve them to have more capabilities? Or do you want to take our current displays, our current display technologies, and give them e-ink capabilities? I personally favor the latter, where we add more functionality to the devices that we carry all day anyways. I don't know if you or your viewers are aware. Last year we released a concept phone, our Mi Mix Alpha. So Mi Mix Alpha featured a folded screen, where the screen was folded around the entirety of the device. Now, this is slightly different than a folding screen, obviously, in utility, but this is more of a proof of concept and us exploring the boundaries of how we can actually adapt displays. We do have a prototype that we have announced online of our folding screen device. It requires more engineering than simply the display. And personal feelings on this, I don't think current iterations that we've seen on the market are really up to snuff. It's cool and it may be a big element of the future, but when we do it, we want to do it 100%. We want it to be correct. So we'll do it essentially when we're ready.
It's amazing to see the progress of display technology over the better part of the last 100 years. We really do take it for granted, so I just wanted to highlight some of the milestones along the way. If you did enjoy this video and want to see anything more on science, technology,
CRT. CRT, or cathode ray tube, was an old type of TV that many people used for decades. Unlike TVs in our era that look thin and lightweight, CRT TVs are heavy and massive because they still use a big tube that emits cathode rays to the screen to form the images. And in terms of image quality, CRT TVs looked blurry and has distorted colors by today's standards. That's because the resolution of CRT was only 480i, which uses interlace scanning, while modern resolution already uses progressive scanning. And just in case you don't know about scanning, while modern resolution of CRT was only 480i, which uses interlace scanning, while modern resolution already uses progressive scanning. And just in case you don't know about interlaced or progressive scanning in TV, progressive means the TV can show a complete image instantly, while interlaced means the TV needs to create two halves of the image and then combine them in order to get the full frame. This is why an image in a CRT can look pale and might have some kind of lines. And not just that, this interlaced scanning can also make objects look blurry when there's a sudden movement on the screen. Despite all that, at least people could still watch some news, cartoons, and retro movies. But over time, their heavy size and low image quality made many people move on to plasma TV. Plasma. Plasma TV was the first flat-screen TV that replaced CRT TVs in the early 2000s. Unlike CRT TVs that were big and heavy, plasma TVs were much slimmer and lighter. This is because plasma doesn't use a big tube like CRT, but instead uses millions of tiny gas-filled cells behind the screen that light up when they receive electricity to produce the image. This technology not only made plasma TVs thinner, but also delivered better color contrast than CRT. And in terms of resolution, most plasma TVs already supported HD and full HD with progressive scanning. Because of this, motion looked clearer and the image felt much smoother overall. These improvements made plasma TVs especially popular for watching movies, sports, and playing console games at the time. However, plasma TV consumed a lot of power, which caused them to produce more heat. Over time, this heat made plasma screens more prone to burn-in and image retention, where a visible mark can appear if the same image stays on the screen for too long. LCD. LCD, which stands for liquid crystal display, is the most commonly used screen technology today. Unlike a plasma TV that creates light by itself, LCD TV uses a light source behind the screen called a backlight. So this backlight emits white light towards the liquid crystal, and the liquid crystals will control how and which light can pass through, and then the light will hit the color filter, thus forming an image on the screen. With this technology, LCD color filter.
Bro, why does this guy like
on the screen?
I like how he likes Devil May Cry. He's got Virgil sitting down on this little party chair.
With this technology, LCD TVs consume less power and produce less heat compared to plasma TVs. And they are also great for long viewing sessions, like watching news or TV shows for hours, because they don't suffer from burn-in. However, LCD TVs aren't that good for watching movies, because this backlight technology often makes everything too bright. As a result, the image can look less realistic.
Virgil again, bro. He knows ball for real. Whoever made these graphics they know ball. Jeez. Let's look at the difference though. I want to take a screenshot of this. Screenshot.
Realistic and less immersive often makes everything too bright. As a result,
Look at that. Plasma. We got plasma and LCD.
the image can look less realistic and less immersive compared to plasma TVs. Also, when a scene shows objects with similar colors such as clouds, smoke, or the sky, LCD TVs can make it harder to see the details. And some LCD variants even have terrible viewing angles too, so colors can look washed out or distorted when viewed from the side. LED. LED, which stands for Light Emitting Diode, is actually still an LCD TV, but the main difference is that they replace the old fluorescent backlight with smaller LED lights that spread across the screen. This not only makes LED TVs more energy efficient, but also improves color and contrast compared to LCD TVs, which makes it good enough for everyday watching like YouTube, Netflix, and TV channels. LED TVs also come in different variants, such as Edge LED, which is cheaper because the lights are only placed around the edges, and Direct LED, which is more expensive because the lights cover the entire back of the screen. In practice, having more LEDs allows better contrast, and this difference becomes even more noticeable when compared to regular LCD TVs, especially in dark scenes. But actually, no matter which type it is, dark scenes can't be perfectly black on LED TVs, and that's normal. This happens because the shine from the backlight can still spread into dark areas. That's why Mini LED was created later. Mini LED. Mini LED is the advanced version of the regular LED TV. So unlike the regular version that only uses hundreds of LEDs, Mini LED TVs use thousands of much smaller LEDs packed behind the screen. This allows Mini LED TVs to dim and brighten different parts of the screen more accurately. As a result, when we see a dark image, Mini LED can show darker blacks while also still keeping tiny details like this charcoal visible. While on a regular LED TV, this is much harder to see due to dark colors getting washed out. Because of this deeper black quality, Mini LED TVs are great for watching movies in dark rooms. And they're also great for gaming, since details and enemies in dark scenes are easier to spot, while bright effects still stand out. But despite being this advanced, Mini LED TVs still have a weakness called blooming. This is when light spreads into nearby dark areas, because the backlight behind the screen still isn't precise enough to control light properly in dark scenes. Another weakness is that in very bright rooms, or when sunlight hits the screen, dark details can be harder to see. This is why a brighter technology like QLED exists. QLED. QLED, which stands for Quantum Dot LED, is also an advanced version of the LED TV. But instead of using many tiny LEDs to improve dark scenes like Mini LED, QLED uses a technology called quantum dots to make the image brighter and colors more vibrant. Because of this, QLED TVs look more eye-catching and perform better in bright rooms or daylight. This is especially useful if your living room gets a lot of sunlight or is more open and well lit. But because QLED focuses on brightness and color, its contrast and blacks aren't as strong as Mini LED. And since it still uses backlight technology, blooming can still happen on QLED TV as well. So in the end, this shows that even advanced LED TVs have limits, which is why OLED exists. OLED, which stands for Organic Light Emitting Diode, is a premium TV technology that offers the highest level of image quality. And despite having the word LED in its name, OLED is actually very different and unrelated to any kind of LED TV, because OLED does...
That's the one I have, boys.
Doesn't use any backlight. Instead, it uses self-lit pixels, which can create their own light and can completely turn off when it needs to show black. As a result, dark areas look truly black, while colors stay bright and vivid, even in very dark scenes. As a simple comparison, OLED and Mini LED can look similar in very dark scenes, but when a bright object suddenly appears, Mini LED might show blooming, while OLED keeps bright and dark areas perfectly separated. OLED also has a great motion clarity, so when objects move very fast, the movement looks clearer on OLED because the pixels respond almost instantly. This makes it great not only for streaming and cinematic content, but also for high-end gaming. But of course, with all those premium features, OLED also becomes more expensive compared to other types of TVs. And because OLED uses organic materials, there's a risk of image retention or burn-in over long-term use. Micro LED. Image compared to other types of TVs. And because OLED uses organic materials, there's a risk of image retention or burn-in over long-term use. Micro LED. Micro LED is a luxury TV screen technology that's mainly used for very large and high-end displays. Instead of using a backlight or organic pixels, Micro LED uses millions of microscopic LEDs, where each tiny LED acts as its own pixel and produces its own light. Or in other words, Micro LED basically combines the strengths of both LED and OLED technologies. This means it can get extremely bright like LED TVs and have perfect contrast like OLED, but without the blooming issues of LED or the burn-in risk of OLED. However, despite all the without the blooming issues of LED or the burn-in risk of perfect contrast like OLED, but without get extremely bright like LED TVs and have perfect contrast like OLED, but without the blooming issues of LED or the burn-in risk of OLED. However, despite all these strengths, Micro LED TVs are still extremely massive and expensive. Because of this, they are mostly only seen in showrooms and demos, and they're definitely overkill for normal use like watching movies or gaming. So in real life, having Micro LED or not doesn't really matter anyway. What matters more is the resolution of your screen, because that's what determines how clear and sharp the image actually looks. Anyway, I already made some other because that's what determines how clear and sharp the image actually matters more is the so in real life, having Micro LED or not doesn't really matter anyway. What matters more is the resolution of your screen, because that's what determines how clear and sharp the image actually looks. Anyway, I already made some other cool videos too, so don't forget to watch them later, okay? OLED. OLED, which stands for Organic Light Emitting Diode, is a premium TV technology that offers the highest level of image quality. And despite having the word LED in its name, OLED is actually very different and unrelated to any kind of LED TV. Because OLED doesn't use any backlight, instead it uses self-lit pixels, which can create their own light and can completely turn off when it needs to show black. As a result, dark areas look truly black, while colors stay bright and vivid, even in very dark scenes. As a simple comparison, OLED and Mini LED can look similar in very dark scenes, but when a bright object suddenly appears, Mini LED might show blooming, while OLED keeps bright and dark areas perfectly separated. OLED also has a great motion clarity, so when objects move very fast, the movement looks clearer on OLED because the pixels respond almost instantly. This makes it great not only for streaming and cinematic content, but also for high-end gaming. But of course, with all those premium features, OLED also becomes more expensive compared to other types of TVs. And because OLED uses organic materials, there's a risk of image retention or burn-in over long-term use. Micro LED.
I'm here at Apple Park for Apple's 50th anniversary. I'm getting an exclusive look at rare archival materials from the early days of the company until now.
We have a lot of cool stuff here today. We have documents from the early days, prototypes, archival materials. Did you know all of this stuff existed?
I did not. I'm guilty of that. We don't have a place where we display all of this. And so a lot of this I've seen for the first time in preparing for the 50th anniversary.
Here we have the patent for the Apple II.
I believe this is the first patent the company ever filed. And now, of course, we've filed 140, 150,000 over the 50 years. But it's the start.
So this is the original iPod.
Yeah, it came out in 2001 and I joined in early 98.
Did you understand what this device was going to mean for the company?
I understood that I loved it because all of a sudden you could have 1,000 songs in your pocket. And I thought that was really big at the time because I remember then being in the car and I thought it was really cool to have a CD changer that had 5 CDs in it because otherwise you'd listen to the same music all the time. But to have 1,000 songs, this was revolutionary at the time.
Do you remember the first song that you listened to on the iPod?
Oh, I think it was a Beatles song. Yeah. Yeah, it was probably Hey Jude.
Hey Jude.
Yeah.
What was harder, designing the iPod?
So let's see. We got the wires for your ears, and then we got that little mesh. We have this little mesh thing going up that with wires, and this too that connects to the mother box.
Or building the supply chain to ship it around the world?
Both of them were very difficult. The supply chain at the time was something we had not done. Initially, there was a modest volume. But as you step out into the 2000s, all of a sudden you're talking about 14, 15 million in 3 months. And so to do that, you've got to run with precision and quality, and you can't afford a misstep.
You once told me that of all of your years at Apple, the launch of the iPhone was your favorite moment. Why?
Because it was something that we all were using every day. We were using that generation smartphone, and it was such an awful experience. And I love the fact that all of a sudden you had this touch interface and it worked like your mind worked.
What are we looking at here? This is the circuit board. This thing is enormous. It's like a cutting board. Like, how do you get this into that?
This is one of the early prototypes. You've first got to prove that everything can work.
The first time you saw the product, do you think we're going to sell billions of these?
No. No, I have to say, I think iPhone surprised probably everyone.
Including you?
Including me. There were obviously many people, several people in the company using the device. They found that in their pocket, whether it's change or keys, it would scratch.
Were you one of them?
Yes. Yeah, well, I think there were many of us that said, oh my God, you know. And Steve did a classic Steve kind of decision of saying, we're going to put glass on this. And it was a man on the moon project to change it between January and June. It was incredible.
This was very obviously a phenomenal success. What's the most important failure in 50 years of Apple?
Well, there have been many, but every failure is the chance to learn something didn't work. We shipped products that weren't successful. We just got up the next day and put our head down and went on to the next thing.
Let's go to the Apple Watch. This prototype of the Apple Watch is being powered by the iPhone. When you look at this, what do you see that I wouldn't see?
You see the start of something incredible here. It was the absolute beginning of the watch, which wound up being this guardian for your health that we really didn't envision from the start. And it became a fitness companion. And this is the exact watch that I wore on stage.
I was going to say, does it look familiar?
For the announcement.
This product did well, but it wasn't a massive hit in the beginning. What do you think changed? Did we change or did the watch change?
Well, I think products are only overnight successes in
Hey Grok, when did Apple Watch launch for the first time?
Hey, checking that out real quick. The first real Apple Watch, the smart one, hit shelves on April 24th, 2015. Apple announced it back in September 2014, but yeah, that's when people actually started wearing it. Here are a couple shots of.
I remember before it got released, I thought that Apple Watch device was going to be revolutionary. I really wanted that as a kid. I had to have a device where it could be an iPhone on your wrist. You can play video games on your wrist and stuff like that and use it as a phone. But there's not too many games on it. It's just fitness, you can call it, which is pretty cool. Check calendars, pretty revolutionary still.
In reverse. The iPod was not, the iPhone was not, the watch was not. This was a matter of continuing innovation and bringing, this was, the iPod was not, the iPhone.
Did the watch change?
Well, I think products are only overnight successes in reverse. The iPod was not, the iPhone was not, the watch was not. This was a matter of continuing innovation and bringing more and more features to the watch, pulling the string on the health features, you know, putting an ECG on the watch. All of these things added to the functionality. And now there's quite a large number of people that can't live without it.
If we're standing here in 10 years,
yeah,
what is that next hit product that will be on this table?
Well, I think it will be something that finds the intersection of hardware, software, and services, because we like to own the full user experience. We don't want to just make great products. We want to put them in the wild and see what other people do with them, and we want it to enrich their life.
Speaking of seeing what people would do, glasses?
I can't say. You can't have a ship that leaks from the top.
Steve Jobs famously told you to never ask what he would do and just do the right thing. Have you decided when you're going to say this to your successor?
That's a question I get.
Famously told you to never ask what he would do and just do the right thing. Have you decided when you're going to say this to your successor?
That's a question I get periodically, and my answer to that is, when the day comes, I'll know it.
Well, Tim, thank you for having us at
Thank
Apple.
you.
Before we go, we do have one more thing.
Okay, one more thing.
This still looks like he's got
Wall Street Journal.
Little white smudge on his nose. I don't know. Maybe it's my OLED screen messing up.
The Wall Street Journal has an archive too, and I went digging through old newspaper clips and found the very first mention of Apple in the Wall Street Journal in the 16th paragraph of a story on page 40 in 1978. In the very first mention of Apple in the Wall Street Journal in the 16th paragraph of a story on page 40 in 1978.
That's
about
amazing.
Investors discovering a new secret weapon, something called the personal computer. What do you think of when you see this? How did you get from here to here?
How did you get from
Yeah,
here?
since it's
How did you get from here to here? That's his question.
chill up my spine thinking about it, honestly. The gratitude I feel for the 50th, after a lot of reflection on it, isn't about one thing in particular. I am very grateful for everyone who's been on the journey.
And we have this story from 1998 about Apple hiring a Compaq executive named Tim Cook.
Yeah.
You weren't available for comment for that story. Thank you for being available for comment today.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. I need a copy of that.
Ooh, transparent screen.
Hey, Evan. Hey, Caitlin.
You know, screens are cool and all, but what would be even cooler than a screen?
I don't know.
A clear screen.
That would be so cool. We could like play video games and see each other's eyes
Through the screen.
through the screen.
Or I could draw silly things on your face through the screen. It would be so cool. But is it possible? Oh, did you have another example?
Or we could like...
Give me a sassy pout. Oh,
Oh, they did it.
oh, baby.
So interesting being able to see you and like what you're doing. Oh.
Supervisor wants in my lap. Hopping up. Yes, I have an assistant.
I can kind of like barely see you in the reflection.
Jube keeps headbutting my arm, so she's having some input too.
Oh, yes. Oh, my.
I'm gonna need to touch up your brows.
Oh, I look so glamorous. We can title this video Evan's E-Girl Makeover.
I'm giving you a purple mustache.
Oh, that's what that is.
I think you look lovely. You're ready to take the internet by storm.
Now that I've been an E-Girl.
That's pretty sick. History of screen glass. History of display glass. History of display glass monitor. Hey Grok, can you give me a quick rundown on how display glasses, display glass like on my monitor has changed throughout the years, like from the first display glass to now, because I noticed there's differences with some sunglasses are more matted and the others are more clear, more glossy.
Sure, let's trace monitor glass evolution real quick. Yeah, monitor glass, or really the front surface, has gone through some big shifts. Back in the CRT days, like the 90s, it was thick, curved glass, super shiny but bulky. Think old school TV vibe, reflected everything, but colors popped without any coding tricks. Then, flat LCDs hit around 2000, early ones often glossy, like this Philips from the mid-2000s, sleek and vibrant, but glare city in bright rooms. Here's a quick before and after. Bulky CRT on the left, slim glossy LCD on the right. Matte came next, anti-glare etching or films to kill reflections. Great for offices, but it softens sharpness, makes stuff look hazy up close. Glossy stayed king for media, deeper blacks, punchier colors. Check these side-by-sides. Matte left, glossy right. See how reflections vanish on matte, but the image gets grainier? Now, OLEDs and mini LEDs mix both. Some nano-etched matte for zero glare, others glossy for that cinema feel. Depends if you're gaming in dark or working under lights. Wild how we went from heavy curved glass to basically invisible coatings. Rig height?
So tell me why which one's better?
Depends what you're doing. Let's break it down. Yeah, no one's better. It boils down to your setup. Glossy, killer for color pop, sharpness, deep blacks. Like these side-by-sides. See how vibrant and crisp the glossy looks? Colors just explode. But in bright rooms, glare everywhere. Mirrors your face, lights, everything. Matte kills that. No reflections. Easier on eyes for work or coding. Though yeah, it can look a tad hazy or grainy up close, like the matte side here. Less punch. If you're gaming movies in dim light, glossy all day. Office, bright window, matte saves your sanity. Pick what bugs you less, glare or softness.
So if a computer screen is broken, but everything's alright, the only compartment that's broken is the glass, right?
Yeah, let's check that out. Yeah, pretty much. If the glass is just cracked on the surface and the picture's still sharp, no lines or dead spots, then yep, only the outer layer's busted. The actual display panel underneath, totally fine. Like this one. See the spiderweb cracks, but everything's clear underneath? You could keep using it no problem. But heads up, those shards can be razor sharp. Cut your finger easy if you brush it. Or dust gets in, screen looks foggy over time, and if it's a laptop, the hinge might loosen too. So yeah, functional? Sure. Safe and pretty? Nah. Better tape it up or slap on a screen protector till you replace the glass.
So
Cheap fix if you...
so why does it look like there's actually like black spots, and it looks like there's actually internal damage, but in reality the broken glass just makes it look like that.
Yeah, that's a sneaky one. Let me explain why. Yeah, it's all optical trickery. The cracks in the glass act like tiny prisms or shadows. When light hits those jagged edges, it bends weirdly, blocks pixels behind it, and creates these dark blobs or spots that scream internal damage. But zoom in, the actual LCD layers are fine. No dead pixels, no bleeding colors, just the front glass messing with what you see. Like this one, spiderweb cracks everywhere, black patches looking brutal, but the image underneath's sharp. No distortion if you ignore the breaks. And here's the fake out close up. Those black spots are just light getting trapped or scattered by the fractures, not real screen failure. Real internal stuff, you'd get lines, flickering, or total blackout zones, like these dead pixel mimics from pressure, but way more uniform and permanent. So yeah, looks wrecked inside, but it's cosmetic. Wipe it clean, cover the cracks, and it'll keep going till the glass fully shatters.
So in reality, so the black spots are shadows that the light from the monitor are casting.
Yeah, exactly. It's shadows and light tricks. Yeah, spot on. The black spots aren't actual damage inside the panel. They're shadows and dark zones from how light bounces off or gets blocked by the cracks. The monitor's backlight shines through, but those fractured edges, they refract light, like mini prisms, scattering it sideways or trapping it. So some areas look pitch black, even though pixels are lit. See this close-up? Cracks everywhere, but the shadows are just light getting messed up. No dead spots underneath. And here's the rainbow refraction thing. Same idea. Edges bend light into weird patterns, creating dark patches where rays don't hit straight. If it was real internal harm, like pressure marks, you'd see uniform clouds or lines that stay even when you tilt the screen. But with glass-only cracks, move your head and those blacks shift, like shadows do. Super annoying, but yeah, just optics playing tricks.
What about the rainbow colors? How come those colors go like everywhere in one line?
Oh, the rainbow lines. Cool. Let's break that down quick. Yeah, those rainbow streaks, that's thin film interference, like how oil on water shimmers. When the glass cracks, it splits into super thin layers or gaps, maybe just nanometers thick. Light hits them, bounces between the surfaces, and waves cancel or add up depending on wavelength. Reds here, blues there, greens over yonder. The straight line thing? Cracks follow the screen's grid. LCDs have pixel rows and columns, so fractures zip along those paths, like seams. Each break creates a perfect little prism strip, so the colors line up in one clean, glowing arc. Check this real cracked TV. See the rainbow hugging the fracture, all neat and linear? And up close, it's the same physics as soap bubbles or CDs, light waves interfering in those tiny air pockets. Move the angle, the whole spectrum shifts. Super trippy, but harmless. Just the glass playing light tricks, not the screen dying.
So to create a monitor, you need a mother box and the display with like a little wire that looks like paper thin connecting to the power.
Yeah, let's break down how a monitor actually gets built. It's simpler than it sounds. Nah, not quite. Monitors don't have a mother box like a computer does. There's no full motherboard inside like in your tower. Instead, it's way simpler. You've got the LCD panel itself, that's the big glass sandwich with pixels, then a couple small circuit boards. One's the main logic.
Keep going.
Yeah, so back to that ribbon cable. It's basically the lifeline. Thin as paper because it's etched with copper traces, like a mini circuit board you can bend. One end plugs into the display panel's connector. Super delicate, right? And the other hits the power or logic board. If that cable frays or snaps, whole screen goes dark or flickers. No signal, no power. But fix it? Just pop a new one in, maybe $30 online. Here's a teardown shot. See how the ribbon snakes under everything, connecting the glass to the brains? And zoom on the plug. Tiny gold pins. Looks fragile but holds up unless you yank it. Honestly, the whole thing's designed to be flat and quiet. No fans, no big chunks. Makes monitors lighter than they look. Want me to walk through swapping one yourself?
Tell me what other countries thought when America or once the first commercial TV got invented.
All right, digging into early TV history. Super cool stuff. The first commercial TV? Actually kicked off in the UK. Scottish guy John Logie Baird sold his televisor sets around 1929. Tiny mechanical thing, spinning disc, neon glow. Super clunky, like watching shadows through a peephole. Here's one. Baird himself with his early rig, all gears and chains. Looks steampunk, right? And a close-up of the guts, those big copper wheels. That's how it scanned images. Europe? They were impressed. Germany jumped in with experiments. France teamed up with Baird. But folks saw it as a novelty, not life-changing yet. America? We copied fast, but waited till 1939 for the big splash. RCA's electronic TV at the New York World's Fair. President Roosevelt opened it. Crowds gawked at live broadcasts. First time regular folks saw moving pictures over air. Check this crowd. People lining up like it's magic. Other countries? UK felt a bit scooped. BBC had Baird stuff earlier, but America's scale and hype made 'em jealous. like they're turning it into a show. Germany had their own sets by 34, but war shut it down. Overall, excitement mixed with wait. Is this real? No one knew in takeover living rooms. Wild how one demo sparked the whole mess, huh?
What about how did the Russians think? What did the Russians feel when America showed up with their first color TV?
Russians and American color TV. Let's dig into that. Yeah, the Russians, well, Soviets back then, didn't exactly cheer when America rolled out color TV in the 50s. First real commercial color sets? RCA dropped them around 1953, but the big flex was 1959 at the American National Exhibition in Moscow. That's where Nixon and Khrushchev had their famous kitchen debate. Nixon pointing at shiny American gadgets, including color TVs, like, look, we got vibrant living rooms. Khrushchev? He smirked, called it capitalist toys, but you could tell it stung. Soviets were proud of Sputnik, rockets, but consumer stuff? They lagged. Color TV felt like propaganda. America showing off freedom through pretty pictures while they stuck with black and white basics. Check this shot. Nixon gesturing at the TV display. Khrushchev eyeing it like it's a trick. Crowds packed. Everyone's gawking. And here's the kitchen setup. Fridges, washers, color screens. Soviets saw luxury, not necessity. Officially, propaganda spun it as decadent West. Too flashy, wasteful. But quietly, folks were jealous. Soviet color didn't hit regular air till 1967, 14 years later. And even then, sets were bulky, rare, like this old record model. So yeah, mixed bag, irritation, envy, and we'll catch up bravado. Color TV became another Cold War scoreboard. America won the living room war early.
What was the first piece of media that had color? And what type of technology did it use to create that color?
Color and media. Let's dig into the first one. Yeah, if we're talking the very first color media, hands down, it's a still photo from 1861. James Clerk Maxwell took this tartan ribbon shot using 3 black and white plates, one through red filter, one green, one blue, then projected them together, additive color, basically mixing light to fake full spectrum. Check it out, looks trippy, like a psychedelic bow tie, but that's how they proved colors could come from primaries. For moving pictures, that'd be Edward Raymond Turner's test footage from 1902, short clips of his kids, goldfish, flowers. Super early, patented in 1899. Tech was additive too. Camera used a spinning wheel with red, green, blue filters, shot sequential frames on black and white film. Projector synced the wheel to flash colors back over 'em, blending into motion. Here's a still from it. Kid by the aquarium. Colors pop, but kind of flickery, 'cause the sync wasn't perfect. And zoom on that rotary filter wheel. Green, red, blue sectors spinning like a color wheel. That's the magic. No dye on film, just light tricks. He died before projecting it right, but restored in 2012. First real color motion ever. Kinda nuts how it started with filters and math, not pixels.
So explain how it works exactly. So it's like they took a picture and they had like color filters, and those color filters emit admitted it to be colorful?
Sure, let's break down how that early color worked. Super simple, actually. Yeah, exactly. It's not the filters emitting color, but they filter light to capture just one piece at a time, then mix them back. Think of it like this. White light's got every color in it. A red filter blocks green and blue, lets only red through. So the photo records how much red hits each spot in black and white. Same for green, blue. Then, to show it, project those three grayish plates. Red filtered one through red light, green through green, blue through blue. Boom. Where red was strong, you get bright red. Mix red plus green equals yellow. All three equals white. That's additive mixing, light adding up. Look at Maxwell's tartan ribbon, shot 3 times, each with a filter. Red plate shows the red ribbon parts dark if no red there. Recombine, full color pops. And the setup? 3 projectors blasting through colored lenses onto one screen. For Turner's movie, same trick, but spinning wheel. Red, green, blue sectors whirl fast. Camera snaps frame after frame, each tinted. Projector spins too, flashes colors quick. Your eye blends them into motion. See the wheel close up? Those colored glass bits do the filtering. No dyes on film, just light tricks. And here's why it works. Red plus green light equals yellow. Green plus blue equals cyan. Additive primaries. Overlap all? White. No magic, just physics. Filters slice light, eyes mash it back. Kinda genius for 1861, huh?
What about on televisions?
All right, let's talk color on TVs. Yeah, on TVs, it followed the same filter idea, like those early movie tests, but scaled up for live broadcasts. First real color TV? CBS nailed a commercial one in 1951, Field Sequential System. They shot the scene black and white, but spun a big color wheel in front of the camera, red, green, blue sectors flashing quick. Each field, half a frame, got one color, red field, then green, blue. At home, your TV had its own matching wheel synced up, spinning over the black and white screen. I blended them into color. Look at this old CBS rig. Huge fan-like wheel, noisy as heck, but it worked for demos. And here's the promo shot. Actress in color on screen, wheel spinning behind the camera. Problem? Black and white set saw flickering rainbows. Total mess. So RCA pushed compatible color in 53, NTSC standard. No wheels. Camera split light into red, green, blue tubes. Signal mixed them. Luminance, black, white, plus chroma, color info. TVs, 3 electron guns, red, green, blue, firing at a screen with phosphor dots. Shadow mask in front. Tiny holes line up beams so red hits red dots. Green hits green. Additive mixing again, but electronic. Check the diagram. 3 guns, beams converging through the mask, hitting those RGB dots. And close-up of the tube, guns at back, phosphor faceplate glowing. Way smoother, no moving parts, backward compatible. That's why color stuck. RCA won the war. Wild how wheels came first, then guns took over, huh?
What's that shadow mask that converts it into? It mixes them. What material is that?
Got it. Let's talk shadow mask. Super key part. Yeah, the shadow mask. It's that thin metal sheet right behind the screen, full of tiny holes. It doesn't mix colors itself. It just guides the beams so they hit the right spots, like a stencil. 3 electron guns fire, 1 red, 1 green, 1 blue. They aim at the same point, but the mask's holes line up perfect. Red beam only slips through to red phosphor dots, green to green, blue to blue. No crossover, no mess. When those dots glow, your eye blends them. Red plus green equals yellow. All 3 equals white. That's the additive trick again. Material? Mostly thin steel early on, but later, Invar, an iron-nickel alloy. Why? Heat from stray electrons warps regular metal, shifts holes, colors bleed. Invar barely expands, stays dead on even when hot, super precise, punched with photo etching for those micro holes. Check this diagram. See the 3 beams converging through the mask's grid, hitting RGB dots exactly? And here's a real close-up. Looks like a metal honeycomb, holes tiny as pinpricks. Cutaway view. Mask sits half-inch back. Beams zoom through. Phosphors light up. No mixing needed, just alignment magic. Kinda wild. Whole color TV hinged on a perforated plate.
And now it's little micro LED lights that light up from when they turn on, when they are directed to. It's like from OLED, right?
Yeah, micro LED's next level. Let's break it down. Yeah, spot on. Micro LEDs like OLED's beefier cousin. Both are self-emissive. Each tiny pixel lights up on its own, no backlight needed. But micro LED uses actual microscopic inorganic LEDs. Think millions of super small red, green, blue chips, while OLED's organic stuff glows when electricity hits it. So yeah, when a pixel turns on, it directs light right at you. Super bright, no haze. Blacks? Total off, like OLED, but micro LED cranks brightness way higher. No burn-in either, since LEDs don't degrade like organics do. Here's a killer close-up. Those RGB specks are the pixels. Each one's an LED, lighting independently. And this side-by-side, OLED left, micro LED right. See how micro pops brighter, colors punchier? Zoom in. Micro LEDs got those grid of tiny lights, no filters, just direct glow. By 2026, Samsung's pushing micro RGB TVs. Same idea, but cheaper than full micro LED walls. Still, it's the future. Brighter than OLED, tougher, but yeah, pricey till they scale. Kinda like going from candle to spotlight, right?
OLED, which stands for Organic Light Emitting Diode, is a premium TV.
Organic light emitting.
OLED,
Organic light emitting
which stands for
diode.
Organic Light Emitting Diode,
Organic light emitting diode
is a premium TV technology that offers the highest level of image quality. And despite having the word LED in its name, OLED
Organic light emitting
is actually very different and unrelated to any kind of LED TV. Because OLED doesn't use any backlight, instead it uses self-lit pixels, which can create their own light and can completely turn off when it needs to show black. As a result, dark areas look truly black, while colors stay bright and vivid, even in very dark scenes. As a simple comparison, OLED and Mini LED can look similar in very dark scenes, but when a bright object suddenly appears, Mini LED might show blooming, while OLED keeps bright and dark areas perfectly separated. OLED also has a great motion clarity, So when objects move very fast, the movement looks clearer on OLED because the pixels respond almost instantly. This makes it great not only for streaming and cinematic content, but also for high-end gaming. But of course, with all those premium features, OLED also becomes more expensive compared to other types of TVs. And because OLED uses organic materials, there's a risk of image retention or burn-in over long-term use. Micro LED. Micro LED is a luxury TV screen technology that's mainly used for very large and high-end displays. Instead of using a backlight or organic pixels, Micro LED uses millions of microscopic LEDs. Is a luxury TV screen technology that's mainly used for very large and high-end displays. Instead of using a backlight or organic pixels, Micro LED uses millions of microscopic LEDs, where each tiny LED acts as its own pixel and produces its own light. Or in other words, Micro LED basically combines the strengths of both LED and OLED technologies. This means it can get extremely bright like LED TVs and have perfect contrast like OLED, but without the blooming issues of LED or the burn-in risk of OLED. However, despite all these strengths, Micro LED TVs are still extremely massive.
Organic light emitting diode, size of light. So organic light emitting diode is it's not LED, right? It's like it produces color by like how small is it?
Yeah, OLED's different. Let's break it down. Yeah, OLED, organic light emitting diode, isn't like regular LED at all. Regular LEDs, they're inorganic chips, usually white or colored, backlighting LCDs. OLED, the organic part means carbon-based molecules, like thin films of stuff that glow when zapped with electricity. No backlight. Each pixel lights itself up. Size-wise, super small. A typical OLED subpixel, like the red, green, or blue bits that make a full pixel, is around 30 to 50 micrometers across. That's microns. Think hair width territory. For phone screens, even tighter, maybe 10 to 20 microns per subpixel. Check this microscope shot. Those glowing rectangles, red, green, blue subpixels, stacked side by side. Each one's organic layer, maybe a few hundred nanometers thick, thinner than paper. And here's another close-up. Diamond pattern, same idea. Tiny organic emitters, no bulky LEDs. Compared to micro LED, those are inorganic too, but shrunk way down, often under 100 microns, some as small as 5 by 5. OLED wins on flexibility and cost for big screens, but micro LED's tougher, brighter, no burn-in. See the side-by-side diagram? OLED's got that emissive organic sandwich. Micro LED's just RGB chips, no filters needed. So yeah, OLED's small is pixel-level magic, organic glow from layers thinner than dust. Kinda wild how they pack that into your phone, right?
So tell me about the carbon side. How is it carbon? How is it organic?
Sure, let's break down the carbon part. Yeah, the carbon part, that's what makes it organic. Like, not a live organic, but chemistry speak for stuff built around carbon atoms. Regular LEDs, they're silicon or gallium crystals, super inorganic. OLED, the light comes from thin films of carbon-based molecules, like rings and chains of carbon hooked up with hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, kind of like plastic or dye, but fancy. Why carbon? It's flexible, cheap to print or vapor deposit, and when electrons zip through, those molecules get excited and spit out light. Red, green, blue, whatever. No metal chunks needed. Take ALK 3. That's trice 8-hydroxyquinoline aluminum, a classic one. Looks like this. 3 organic arms wrapped around an aluminum center, all carbon skeletons. See those hex rings? Pure carbon networks. When voltage hits, electrons jump, energy drops, boom, glow. And here's the whole stack. Emissive layers that green bit, organic molecules sandwiched between electrodes. Up close, tiny organic films, maybe 100 nanometers thick, carbon chains glowing on command. That's why it's bendy, thin, perfect for phones, no bulky backlight. Just carbon doing its thing, right?
Okay. Okay, I gotta take a little break with learning about screens. I gotta take a little break of